Come on, man. Jesus.
That was weak.
Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 218. We've got Nate Hale with me. This is Steve Crane. We've got a bottle here that he and I are drinking here in the garage, and we have a guest that is not in the garage, not in the state, not in a garage. We'll find out where she is, but we are joined by a special guest that we'll bring on just momentarily. Before we do that, we want to thank you guys for tuning in and also for sharing the podcast, whether it be through Facebook, YouTube, obviously on the video. Those both go live on Wednesday nights around 7:45 to 8 o'clock at this point, and also on the audio streaming podcast apps, which I need to update and get everything up to date, including the last few episodes here. So share it, like it, review it. We appreciate the support, and then also we'll want you to check out the podcast of our special guest tonight as well, and that will be introduced momentarily. But I want to also thank you guys that support us through patreon.com/bourbon and BS podcast. The monthly contributions are fantastic. We appreciate that, as well as those that have donated or at least bought, in a sense, a bottle through Venmo at Bourbon and BS. So we appreciate that one-time contribution. You guys have those available to you. We want to also thank, obviously, our sponsors, Tinderbox at Easton, for the My Father Bijou, which is what we are smoking tonight, and the continued support for the weekly featured cigar. That's Tinderbox at Easton in Columbus, Ohio. Check them out. They also do shipping as well. If you need more details on that, let us know. Altadis USA, we've got the H. Upman Nicaragua by AJ Fernandez as a second cigar tonight, which always kind of a go-to, I think, from their line.
Yeah. Great
price point, great blend. AJ can't do much wrong at this point. Also, BS Cigar Company for the gold and silver. Fantastic cigars, both Nicaraguan blends. The gold's through Plasencia, and the silver is through Espinosa Cigars. So thank you very much, BS Cigar Company. And if you like what you see here, you like the swag.
Oh.
What do you think I was talking about? Buyjack.com/bourbon and BS. I'm wearing one of the newest Raglan 3/4 baseball tees with the black and the blue, also black and red. And Nate's got the podcast shirt. Pour one more, light up another. We'll figure this out together. Just found out today that the charity green shirt, we did 10 shirts.
Okay.
So we got $100 going them to St. Baldrick's and $110 going to the National Breast Cancer Foundation.
From the pink shirt.
We did 11 of those, right?
Yeah.
11 of those. So now that we're all caught up with buyjack.com, because they had some things going on with their royalties and their system, adding in the new stuff, all that stuff. You should see those coming up in the upcoming weeks. I'll post that on the Bourbon and BS podcast, Instagram, Facebook, and also on the Bourbon and BS community page. Okay, anything else? Cool.
Nothing that I can talk about yet.
No, you can't. Next week, we might actually have a special broadcast, not necessarily official podcast, but we're trying to sort something out for maybe next Monday coming up here,
Possibly.
May 2nd, to do something that Nate was fortunate to partake in. I was working, so I couldn't go, but
I was happy to go in your stead.
Perfect. I'm sure they were too. We're going to bring her on. Everyone, welcome Ash from Ashes with Ash. Ash,
hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And where are you joining us from?
Okay, I'm in New York City, and I am in my bathtub. Because, New York City, we don't have garages here, and I couldn't make it to the lounge tonight. So, and for the just audio people, I'm fully clothed in my bathtub. There's no water in it.
You could be fully clothed with water in there.
I could.
You have electronics in your hands. I just don't think that's a safe. And you're drinking. I don't think this is safe if you do it that way. So
You're right.
Yeah, no lifeguard on duty. Ash, you're smoking the My Father as well, the Le Bijou, correct?
Exactly.
Is this a cigar that you've had before?
Yes, one of my favorites for sure.
One of your favorites. It's always difficult to line it up, when it comes to having a guest on remotely that's not with a company, a rep or anything like that they can just be like, oh yeah, I've got the whole catalog, so we can do whatever we want. So
right.
Appreciate you trying to work with us on that. It's tough to line up what we're smoking. We were not able to line up the drink of choice. You have some Makers, is that right? Just Maker's Mark?
Woodford.
I'm sorry. Woodford with an addition to the cocktail.
Some Luxardo.
Wow.
It's delicious.
and we are drinking the Rittenhouse Rye Whiskey Bottle and Bond. Nate brought that to the garage here. I'm interested to try. I've never had this.
Neither had I.
Yeah.
But it's always been one I've wanted to try.
I don't know much about it. You say you do.
Mhm.
But before you want to, let's start with the cigar since we're all smoking a cigar.
Yeah.
Ash, before in part 2, we're going to talk a bit more about what's going on with you and how we linked up here. But tell us, I guess, tell the audience a little bit, at least, about yourself, what you do, what the podcast's about, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I work in a cigar lounge in New York City, downtown. I have my podcast. I've had it for about a year. It's called Ashes with Ash. And it's just, I interview mostly women in the cigar industry. I've had a couple of awesome guys too, but mostly women in the industry and just aficionados, tobacconists, everything like that.
What cigar lounge do you work for?
Davidoff.
Davidoff, really?
The big boy.
Yeah.
All right. That's not on any of your info. I was like, I don't know what
I know.
she's
They don't
at-
like me to like promote it. So
Oh, well,
yeah.
don't worry. No one's listening. I don't know.
Ouch.
I don't know.
Oh, well.
That's how long have you been with them?
Like 8 months.
8 months.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Pretty recent. Yeah.
So what made you start doing a podcast?
Man, I guess it was just during the pandemic. I missed smoking and talking to people, talking about cigars. And so I just thought it would be cool to start a podcast. And it's been great ever since. I've met so many cool people from all over the world. It's
That's
been
really
better
neat.
than I even imagined. Yeah.
And do you just do it? I mean, do you do it remotely, or is it always in person, or how do you handle that?
Mostly remotely. Yeah. I think I've only done like 2 or 3 in person.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you kind of kept that on. We actually went remote like this when everything was shut down.
Right.
Back in 2020. We used to always be in the garage. We were basically filming, we were recording, always in the garage, live guests. And then doing that, it kind of opened up what we were able to do. Started using this service that we're using now. And we still try to have everyone in the garage, but it's nice to be able to do something like this, talk to someone states away in their bathroom.
Exactly. I wish I would have.
Yeah, basically the first half of the podcast existence was basically in person, and then it wasn't until COVID that we had to try and get creative and in order to try and keep it going and get guests that couldn't travel.
That's it. But, all right. Well, Ash, so I guess let's see. Tell us about the My Father Bijou. I'm not going to put you on the spot completely, but we can talk about it as a group. What do you know about it? What do you know about My Father? I'm not, like I said, I'm not quizzing you. Just what do you like about it?
I don't actually know the binder filler wrapper, but I do know I get a lot of leather notes out of it and a little hint of cherry. That's why I'm doing the Luxardo in my whiskey tonight, to see if I can get more of those cherry notes out of it.
I got you. Well, it's all Nicaraguan from what I hear, from what I know of this one, which always surprised me.
Did I freeze?
We heard you.
We heard you.
Okay, you guys froze for a second.
which might happen from time to time. It's a beautiful thing, and depend on your internet connection and ours, but we're usually pretty good here. But so from my understanding, this is a all Nicaraguan blend. So top to bottom Nicaraguan. It is obviously a dark wrapper. It's Oscuro, I would say.
Yeah.
So a little bit darker than a typical Maduro wrapper. And it means the jewel. The Le Bijou is the jewel. Do you know the significance of the date? 1922 is on here.
I'm going to guess that was when the patriarch of the family was born.
Not Don Pepin himself.
His father?
Correct. So the whole My Father brand name was kind of, it says underneath there, Garcia and Garcia. And that was something that Jaime, the son, was, basically that was the whole thing. So the first blend was kind of made for Don Pepin, who's been in the business for a long time. And that was where they named it My Father. And this was one of the follow-up blends they did. And so as a tribute to his father, they did the Le Bijou 1922.
So you said it's all Nicaraguan. Do they say what type of tobacco the wrapper or anything is?
Yeah, I don't see that. I can look it up here a little bit. I showed you some of the info that I had on my phone, where it's in 2 columns on an iPhone screen, which is nice. It's really easy to read that.
I'll try and see if I can look up.
Maybe it's just on that one, but yeah, I don't know. What you like this cigar? You said the chair is helping with the cocktail, if you will, that you have there.
I haven't gotten it yet, so I haven't gotten those cherry notes. I think it's more like in the middle towards the end. Then I'll get to it.
Okay. What's your typical cigar of choice as far as like mild, medium, full bodied?
I usually always go full bodied, unless I've smoked like too many the night before. Then I need like a lighter one.
I got you. You finding it there?
So, according to one website I found, the wrapper is a Habano Oscuro.
Makes sense.
So you were right with the Oscuro. So it's a Habano wrapper.
Yeah, it's definitely a darker shade. Habano, is it Nicaraguan, does it say?
Yes.
Okay. Because they use a lot of Ecuadorian wrappers on their stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, My Father Cigars, for those that aren't as familiar with it, this was released in 2013, this cigar. So they started shortly before that. It was the early 2010s, to my knowledge, as a company. And but yeah, Don Pavine has been in the business for a long time. We've reviewed it on the podcast before, as far as that goes, the story behind that stuff. Yeah. But this cigar, one of your favorites, Ash, one of our favorites. It's like we've done 218 episodes in, and we're finally talking about this cigar. It's one that we just kind of glanced over for some reason.
And it was the 2015 Cigar of the Year in Cigar Aficionado, which was actually a few years after the Las Antillas was number one.
That was 2012. Yeah. 2012.
Yeah. So they had 2 number ones in a 3-4 year span.
Ash, do you pay much attention to the Cigar Aficionado Top 25? You put a lot of clout behind that, a lot of weight behind that?
Not really. I like to look at it and read it and see what they say, but just everybody's palate's so different.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it just all depends,
I think a lot of people pay attention to the rankings every year because working in the retail, we'll definitely get people that after those rankings come in, like they'll either have it saved on their phone or they'll bring in like the little tear out from an issue of Aficionado. And they're like, I just want as many of the top 25 as you carry. But like this was one that I definitely remember. The shop I was working at the time had this in stock, and I think it was that box press torpedo specifically that was number one.
I think you're right,
and that just started flying off the shelves. People had never heard of it, because again, it only came out in 2013, and then 2015 it's number one cigar of the year, and it just blew up. And I still think it's a very popular blend from them.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so, it is, and I think it's a lot of their selections are fuller body. Would you agree, Ash?
Yeah, pretty much all of them. I feel like there's one Lancero we just got at the shop that's a little bit lighter, but still mostly all medium to full bodied.
I think even their Connecticut is pushing a bit
medium.
Fuller. Yeah, fuller for a Connecticut. But
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it is.
Well, and a lot of their stuff, with them using their Nicaraguan tobacco, a lot of their cigars will have a spice to it, and sometimes when you have that spice in a cigar, even with a Connecticut wrapper, with all that Nicaraguan tobacco in there, it still gives that cigar a little bit more punch and body. And so, also that H2K hybrid that they do, like a lot of people look at that and it's a Connecticut hybrid, or you have the My Father CT, the Connecticut, and they're like, oh, this is probably going to be a mild cigar. And no, it's not. They're very complex smokes, and even coming in at medium body cigars, there's a lot going on with those.
Oh, absolutely. I'm trying to share this to different pages here. I encourage you guys to do the same. So that's, Ash, I'm not being rude intentionally. It's rude
No.
by action here. That's just, kind of
I got
the way I do things here. But I'm also looking at, so I don't know if you can see the live comments on your screen at all if you go to the comments section of it, but we had quite a few people out there. Sean Anderson asked, does she do her podcast from her bathroom?
Sometimes. I usually do it from Barclay Rhett Cigar Lounge, downtown New York City. That's where I usually do it. But sometimes I just can't make it.
Can't make it. Can't make it out of the bathroom to do a podcast. I know the feeling.
I'm just stuck in the bathtub. Okay.
Oh yeah, me too. Jonathan Herring also asked, "Have you had Laurel on your podcast? You know Laurel Tilley?
I haven't.
You know who that is?
Tilley. I don't think I do.
So she's the Macanudo brand ambassador for General Cigars.
Okay, I need to hit her up then.
Yes. You need to definitely connect you guys. She's great. She's been on our show. She comes to we do a Smoking 10 event here in Columbus, Ohio as well. And so she was just at that, but she is extremely sharp and fun and knows her stuff for sure.
I think
perfect.
I think the first time we had her on was when we did a 2-part series about like women in the cigar industry and women in the whiskey industry.
That's right. It was a 3-parter, right? Or
2-parter. Cool. 2-parter because we did one whiskey and we had her on for the cigar side of it.
We had Amy, who owns McClellan's Pub here in town.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Another comment here from what was it? They like this Tub Talk with Ash.
I like that.
Jonathan, I like Smoke on the Water, but I think that's already taken by
probably
by a rock band.
Yeah.
Deep Purple.
That was interesting also.
Damn, that's a good one.
What does he say here? Yeah, so Tim Dodge says, we smoke a My Father on my dad's birthday every year, June 19th. That's awesome. I not to get too serious, but I actually grabbed My Father the day my father passed away that night. Yeah, so it is kind of cool to have that family tie-in with the name and the story and the actual family itself with the Garcia family, that it really, there's a lot of these histories, with bourbons and different whiskeys, and also the cigar industry, that these, this lineage comes from 5 generations back sometimes. And I think that's something that, something that has a My Father on there, the history of it, you can absolutely relate to it. Like Tim said out there, is that it's nice to have that in your hand. You look down at it and it has the words you're looking for and has the story, if you know, behind it. I think it's really cool.
I also think it's cool with their stuff, like that primary band with with the initials. It varies from blend to blend. It's not the exact same band on every single one of their blends. They kind of add other colors to it based on what the secondary band or the foot band is as well.
Yeah, they do. That is nice.
Because we've had a few other ones. Like we've had the original My Father. We've had the Opulencia, which has that green.
Yeah.
What was that one?
La Gran Oferta.
La Gran Oferta. Yeah. That had like a little bit more orange to it.
Yeah.
Pink.
No, that was La Promesa. Has the pink.
Yeah,
they got a lot of them.
Yeah.
They got a lot of them. This has been a go-to for me on the My Father line, though.
Yeah.
Were you laughing at us? What do you guys think?
Suds and sticks.
Oh, jeez. I shouldn't have pointed out the comments. Now you're not here. Actually, still with us? I'm sorry.
I'm listening.
I'm messaging with the crowd here.
Suds and sips.
Jonathan Herring says, I'll stop. No, keep it coming. That's fine. I don't have a problem with it. So what do you think of this cigar, Nate?
Honestly, the first time I smoked it was probably right after it got that #1 rating when I was working at another shop that carried it.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to smoke that cigar, and when people came in asking if it was worth being #1 or worth something trying, because even back then it was a $12 to $13 cigar, and now it's depending on the size, it's kind of that 12 to 15 range, I think. But I think a lot of the My Father stuff is in that same price range. This one has been my favorite blend of theirs. I do tend to like that medium full body. This one I think is a little bit more balanced than say the Opulencia, which I think is a little bit stronger.
Yeah. Not a fan.
I just you don't like that one?
I've tried it over and over again, and I'll say I don't really care for that blend for whatever reason, and then someone will come in, like buys 10 of them and just, I love this one. I was like, maybe I'm missing something. And
yeah.
I don't think
it's
I am.
Fruity.
That one.
What?
I think it's fruity. The
The la-
Opulencia.
Opulencia.
Mhm.
Isn't that one a broadleaf Maduro?
I'll have to look
I think
again.
I think it
thought
is,
was
and I think that's
Andres.
why Brian doesn't care for that one as much
I
either.
don't know, man.
But we like Habano tobacco,
Mhm.
most of us that work at the shop, so I think that's why this tends to be one of our favorites in the shop. But it's not necessarily full body, but it's full flavor. There's a lot going on, and because they're not trying to just blow out your palate with strength, it allows you to actually taste all the flavors that are going on with that cigar. So even though it's a medium full bodied cigar, I think it's very well balanced for something that strong, because it's strong, but it's also strong on flavor.
What do you think of the Retro Hail?
You tell me first.
I'm getting like a woody spice from the Retro Hail. I don't know about you, Sean.
It's
Woody spice.
it's definitely got a spice kick. I mean, there's quite a bit of spice in that, but there's a dryness to that
I
spice.
think that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so kind of like a cedar type. Yeah, with that
Sitting in a
dryness.
sauna. You know what I mean? That sauna air where it's kind of you're right there.
Cedary.
Yeah, it's like you did it. Yeah. We've got a couple people in the garage as well, which you kind of heard in the background, Ash. But they've got a mic
Hello.
too.
So instead of sugar and spice, cedar and spice.
It's not necessarily like smoking in the bathroom, but maybe like if you smoked in a sauna. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I get. I get like that
It was
woody.
smoking in the boys.
You said dry. All right, stay on task here.
I know.
Jesus. Yeah, freaking Bell over here.
Ash, what?
Hey.
What? So, someone had asked me, what does this cigar run in New York City?
Oof, this
'Cause your
one.
guys' tax is a little bit different than Ohio.
A lot bit.
Oh yeah, they're horrible. This one I think is 17, 18
And
a stick.
What size do you have there?
I have the torpedo.
Torpedo.
Yeah.
We've got the Toro, and on the shelf at Tinderbox is $13.95.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
yeah, about 4 or 5. 4, yeah.
So what we have in Ohio went in effect not a few years back, actually, about probably 5 years, I want to say. But we used to be a 17% tobacco tax on cigars, and now it's 17% with a 50. I think it's a 54.
54 now.
It's like 53, 54 cents per cigar cap. So it's helped out a lot. Yeah.
Your
It's
guys is
helped out a
what,
lot.
Almost.
75%? Okay.
It's not as bad as California. I know California is 75. Ours is almost there though. It just went up again in January.
And do you have a separate tax for the city as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I know Chicago is too. When I bought a few cigars there, it was kind of like you have they break it down on the receipt, even that Cook County tax on there. It's crazy.
What is it, like 20 cents a stick just in Cook County?
It was more than that, but this is again going back like 6 years since I bought it. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, Ash, hi. This is Sean. I'm behind the
Hello.
screen. Hello. I was in California a few weeks ago, and I think this ran about $28.
$28?
Yeah. And even like any of the ones that I normally saw here at the Tinderbox, it was almost double there. So just even.
So it actually reminds me. 2 weeks ago, we had a couple guys that were in town from Syracuse, New York, and he said all of our prices on the My Father cigars were about the same as what he pays in Syracuse.
Really?
However, the Punch Knuckle Buster, which is like $7 to $8 for the two sizes that we have in stock, $14.
Jesus.
The Knuckle Buster?
The Punch Knuckle Buster.
Well,
You'd be better off
I'm
just
not trying to
having
give
a-
out anything, but we actually, I think, have that marked a little high for Ohio.
Okay.
So what we're saying is that if you're smart, just order some stuff from Tinderbox and get them for half price.
Not half price from where you're at, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
compare
that's what I'm
it.
talking
It's
about.
not a 50% discount.
Well,
All right.
it's close
Compared to
enough.
what he's
Work
paying.
there.
Close enough, Ash. Close enough.
Yeah, in New York, it's illegal to discount tobacco. So we can't even give deals if someone buys a box, they get a percentage off the next box or something like that.
You don't have anything, no box deals at all.
Nope, we can't discount any tobacco.
Wow.
But you work at it's a lounge as well, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's really where you guys are probably. Are you allowed to be a bar as well?
No, but we do sometimes we'll make it like a private event just
Okay.
to get around the law, and then you can bring your own alcohol. some nights we do that.
But I think that's something that's really important because I mean I can't imagine like if you were just like a retail pick up and go and
no,
it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense.
I would be so bored.
Well, yeah, but I meant for business sake, but yes.
Yeah. Okay.
For your own personal enjoyment during your day, yes, that's very important.
So you guys can't do like a buy one get 50% off. Can't do any of that thing, that kind of stuff.
They can't.
Nope. The only thing we can do is like if someone's spending money, like they're buying a couple of boxes. If they have an address out of state, out of New York, we can ship it, and then it's cheaper because it takes away those New York taxes.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
So we can do that.
Can do that.
People will find a way to get around taxes. It's amazing how that works.
Right.
They do. They absolutely do. I like this cigar. Like I said, I think we're all in agreement that we like the cigar. I like your description of it. It is something that I don't think is too overbearing, like some fuller body cigars. I think My Father Cigars, I'm trying to think, maybe that's one of the reasons. I think that like the La Opulencia, and I hate to compare throughout the brand, but it is easy to do that, especially with the varieties that they have. The La Opulencia, I think, is just, it's, I don't get a whole lot of notes from it. It's just kind of a rich tobacco, but it almost, I don't care for the finish of it. This one, it's got a lot of flavor, not only on the palate, but then with the retrohale, I think it's got a lot going on. Like I said, with that spice, I think it's just got this really pleasant, again, I said it before, like a woody spice on that, which Ash, I can't really smoke a cigar without retrohaling. Do you retrohale?
Sometimes I do. I don't do it a whole lot though. I know I need to start. Get those
you get a lot from it.
notes.
And this one for sure. This one for sure. I think that I like this one in the My Father portfolio. When they released the La Promesa, they released the La Gran Oferta. They came in a few bucks cheaper.
They did. And
when I smoked it, not saying that with all cigars, but with those blends from My Father, when they put the primary band on there, it was kind of like, oh, I get it. Like, yeah, this is a slightly lower end, maybe less age on the tobacco. Something that is missing from that compared to like the Le Bijou, in my opinion. I know we've sold the other ones. It's just their line. I mean, the Don Pepin Garcia line, the Flor de las Antillas line, the Antigüedad, like these, I think they price it accordingly as far as complexity on that, the blends.
Yeah. Those ones were justified with that, a couple bucks cheaper price point. They were more like that medium or lighter side of medium body, not as complex
one note
as this. With this being an Oscuro wrapper, that means that they have aged and fermented this wrapper leaf a little bit longer, which is going to justify that higher price point.
Toothy wrapper too.
Yeah, but then again, it's all, like I said earlier, it's a very complex smoke. There's a lot going on with this cigar. There's a lot of flavor that just completely coats your palate.
Yeah. How's the construction on yours, Ash?
It's pretty good. It's burning slightly weird, but not too bad.
Could be the bathroom fan.
Probably.
Operator? No,
not operator. I'm just saying like the current in there. You know what I
mean? Yeah, that's true.
That is another thing that is consistent about My Father, the construction. I mean, it's very rare that I have smoked a My Father cigar that has had a construction issue.
Yeah.
They burn well, they draw well. It's rare that you come across something that has an issue like that where it's tough to draw or it canoes on you real bad.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's another thing. Give them credit for what they're doing, and like I said, a lot of their stuff tends to be that $10 to $15 price point. But then again, a lot of cigars are, but the construction is just top notch.
I think for a while, I don't know if you would agree or disagree, Ash, that the stuff coming from My Father, like Don Pepin was like the hot hand in the game. I mean, there's like everything they touched, everything that they were, doing for like say Ashton, for La Roma and for San Cristobal.
Yeah.
They did stuff for Nestor Miranda. They've done a lot of stuff. It's like they couldn't, everything they put out, I felt like was pretty much a winner.
They do Tatuaje.
Oh, yeah.
Tatuaje is fantastic as well.
Love Tatuaje.
Well, I mean, the first time we ever had Tyler Jones on, he talked about like, in the 2010s, like 2010 to 2015 was, those years that kind of dominated by My Father.
I would agree.
2016 to 2020, maybe further, AJ Fernandez has been the big hot name.
I think
that
currently still
a lot of people are wanting to blend with, and you see him putting out a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
that garners a lot of attention and notoriety.
Would you agree with that, Ash?
Totally. Yeah, I feel like I hear that name almost every day. AJ Fernandez.
He's just got such just crazy amounts of tobacco, it sounds like, or so it seems, and the fact that he's hooked up with Altadis and a couple other companies, and it just and I think the My Father camp is not as big as AJ. I mean, it just doesn't have the reach.
No, but I think a lot of people don't realize quite the reach that My Father does. So you mentioned La Roma de Cuba and San Cristobal. Those are Ashton brands, but it's amazing.
They pay a lot of bills for them too.
Yeah, it's amazing when people come in, they're looking for Ashton products, and you tell them like, oh, Ashton doesn't actually make any of their own cigars. So like San Cristobal and La Roma de Cuba, they're actually made by My Father. They're Nicaraguan cigars, and like people are like, are you serious?
Yeah,
and they're shocked to hear that. I think Tatuaje, with Pete Johnson's connection with the family now. I think I think a lot. And when he, you saw in that documentary, Hand Rolled, that's who he went to make his cigars. Mm-hmm. So that one, I think, people know the connection between those two. It's some of the other brands that they don't realize My Father has a connection to it. That Nestor Moran Special Selection, like right on the bottom of the box, made at My Father factory.
Yeah.
And so there's some people that smoke that cigar, and that's an under $10 cigar here in Ohio. And people are like, are you kidding me? Like have
you smoked that one?
Which one?
Nestor Miranda Special Selections from Miami Cigars.
No, I don't think I have. I've definitely heard of it though.
Solid. Shannon, go ahead.
Hey, this is Shannon. I'm one of the garage dwellers here.
Hello.
Yeah, you guys are talking about the My Father brand. Anytime you hear somebody speak about the brand, it's always positive. I've never heard one say.
Not my cup.
Never
heard anybody say like, "Oh, that's a crappy cigar. I would never go back to that cigar." But I don't smoke a whole lot of them. But I think this is the first time I've had this series.
Really?
I'm freaking enjoying it.
I feel like I've failed you as your tobacconist.
I know.
You've been holding out on me, Steve.
So good.
The band's a little fancy for you. You know what I mean? It doesn't really.
It's so fancy.
I want you to
too
feel
pretty.
I do have my
Shannon's
pinky.
a pretty guy too. I mean, he's a barber. I mean, he knows what he's doing.
I got my pinky up right now, so it's good. No, I'm really enjoying it. Like you guys said, the construction, the flavor profile. I had this in my. Oh, go ahead.
Does anybody else get leather from it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I get leather from a lot of cigars, but I usually stick to darker cigars. But some people are like, I have no idea what flavor you're talking about when I say leather.
Tell me how you would describe the leather thing. I think that I feel like it's an agreed upon note.
Yeah, it's like a cedar whiskey in between. It's like bold and I don't know.
Jonathan Herring says late August baseball glove for me. I mean, yeah. Kind of like well aged. Like I'm not making fun. Like dark brown leather.
Yeah.
It's got to be dark brown, I feel like.
Yeah, like anyone who's ever played baseball or softball, when you had to like retie one of the strings, like you sit there and you kind of twist it around and then you put it in your teeth. Okay. Like, yeah.
That's it. That's it. Exactly.
But I also know people that like,
sounds delicious.
Well,
I love it.
I also know people that
chewing on that.
When they used to work outside, like doing yard work or landscaping or something like that, you don't always have a water bottle on your hip. And so like my uncle, for example, he used to sit there and get pieces of leather and he would just chew on the leather because that would cause him to salivate. And so it'd keep his mouth from drying out.
Huh.
Never heard that before.
Interesting.
So that's one of the reasons why I know what leather tastes like, because I've done that.
Just chew on leather.
Yeah.
Like on your belt?
No, not my belt.
What leather?
You can buy leather.
You just go buy chewing leather?
Yeah. Just go to Hobby Lobby, get the leather, and just
comment. It could be tan leather. Yeah, I mean shades of brown. I just think that dark brown is kind of what I would prefer.
Well, probably because like that richness of the cigar, like that richer tanning, that darker brown leather. Yeah.
I don't think there's any credibility behind any of this, but I like where we're headed with it.
All right, I'll just stop.
No, I think it's good. Are you getting any cherry, or is it was that a previous note that you thought?
That was a previous note that I thought. I'm not getting it. I even tried to like switch to just plain soda water for a second. I thought maybe my drink was overpowering it, but I'm still not getting it yet. But maybe we'll get there. Still got time.
You still got time. All right. Yeah, I took off the Bijou. You're ahead of me there.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I think the construction on this cigar it's nice. It's and maybe it's just the humidor right now at Tinderbox, but this actually feels a little softer and a little not as yours is a little softer. We've got on a low shelf, so that could be part of it, but it's smoking beautifully.
Oh yeah,
because I remember sometimes in the past some of My Father products are like just really not dense, but it's almost very firm cigars. I don't know, is yours softer, Ash, or is it pretty firm?
When I was feeling it earlier, it felt a little firm, but now it's softening up, I guess because the heat, but it was a little firm earlier. I was worried it wasn't humidified enough, but
sometimes that can happen, just holding it in your fingers, the pressure you put on your fingers, rolling it around, the heat, like that can all kind of soften it up a little bit and, kind of open up the draw sometimes when you do that.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, you guys are in Columbus, Ohio, right?
Correct.
I was there like September. I wish we knew each other then.
Absolutely.
But I noticed they sell cigars just in like grocery stores.
They do. Yeah.
Are they humidified well, though?
Yeah, that's the tough part, right?
The key word there is well. Because usually they're behind the register that sells all the cigarettes, or they're in the liquor department.
Yeah,
and those are probably not generally they're not people that really know cigars and how to maintain a humidor.
Exactly.
But I mean, they're getting their cigars from someone, from a distributor, usually from someone in town.
There's a couple distributors in town that I know of. And so it's something that when they get to it's who's maintaining. I mean, you'll have a few liquor stores mainly, which in the state of Ohio, it's state-run liquor agencies, but they're still usually either grocery stores or they're privately owned businesses. It depends who's working them. If you have someone that it's just like when you see cigars sold at some bars as well. If it's just someone that drops it off and they're not really turning a whole lot and they've been there for 6 months, no one's maintaining that.
Yeah,
exactly.
They're really not. I mean, in UDF, like gas stations, I mean, they have that in there. It has that hygrometer on the front of that plexiglass, case that never leaves 70 for some, I don't know how. I wish we could maintain our humidity that consistently.
Yeah, right. So hard.
But I do think that there was something that the industry did a while back that never really caught on for those. But we did a few bars that we worked with the fresh, those individually fresh sealed. Do you ever see those little packs that some of the companies did? They were really big.
It was the humidity packs, you mean?
Yeah, but they were like individual. Drew Estate did it with some of their acids. It was like a pack, like Swisher Sweet 2-packs come in. You just rip it off, but I mean, inside there's like a little Boveda. It's fresh sealed. It was I thought a very smart way of doing it, and then never took off. Like no one. General was doing it with a lot of their stuff. Like we would get some stuff, like even from Davidoff, like the Baccarats we would get in because they handle that. But they would have the Baccarats in the fresh packs. But like the big ones from like General, like some of the punch blends, the Macanudo cafes were big ones. Even Oliva did it with their nubs, and so it was really good idea for golf courses, for liquor stores, for bars, because it's like all you have to do is literally not have any humidification in there. And they even had the little thing where you could like slide it on a rack type thing. No, I don't know why it didn't catch on.
That's crazy.
I think it was just more of a hassle because it came in like units of like 5 or 6 cigars. But you think for a lot of these types of places, like you saw when you were here, they're not churning through even dozens of cigars, I don't think.
It probably doesn't catch the eye as well. Like if you sit there and you have like a stack of those individual fresh packs versus if the cigars were in there stacked up.
It's
like
not as classic looking.
Yeah,
no.
it's not as appealing, but it's gonna do a better job at maintaining the integrity of the cigar.
It really would.
Right.
Yeah. The ones at the liquor stores and gas stations, like those are more like I need a cigar and I got no other option.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Like you know you're not necessarily going to get a cigar that truly represents that label, but it's more of you're just in the mood for a cigar and that's the closest thing you got to you.
Tastes like woodiness and regret.
Yeah, every dry cigar tastes the same.
Yeah, it's so true.
I know it's gonna taste like shit. I'll take two.
Yeah,
and they're going to be a couple bucks more expensive than your local brick and mortar.
Jonathan Herring, who works for Forged, which is also with General, right? So he was with General before. Now he's in their Forged branch, but it's just we still sell tons of them. So maybe they did catch on.
Well, because they have them in the Macanudo, the Hoya de Monterey, Partagas, and Punch.
Yeah.
So they still have 4 of their key brands that they still do those individual fresh packs for. Ooh.
And for the record, I wouldn't go to a cigar shop to buy a steak, so why would I go to a grocery store for a cigar? Thanks, John.
I'd buy a steak from a cigar shop.
Yep.
Well, one of our part-timers is actually a butcher at a grocery store, so if you ever need, but,
nice.
Let's kind of switch gears momentarily here to the Rittenhouse Rye Whiskey. If you could bear with us here, have you had that before, Ash?
I don't think I have.
See, I had neither.
Is it good?
Rittenhouse Rye Bottled in Bond.
Yes.
All right. So tell us, you were kind of, I asked Nate if he knew anything about it. He said he did. And then what was your disclaimer that you wouldn't tell me anything about?
Well, so I'll tell the story later, or after talking about the whiskey, but
okay.
So this is a Heaven Hill product, and this came in Heaven Hill kind of made some waves in the news a little bit with this last year. So it's a rye whiskey bottled in bond. So it's at least 4 years old and it's bottled at 100 proof. They don't actually put an age statement on the bottle, but in order for it to be a bottled in bond, it has to be at least 4 years old, 100 proof, government bonded warehouse. And it has to be from, that same distillate season. So either January to June or July through December. They can't mix barrels in between. So like we talked about with Andemic when she was on and Watershed came out with their first bottle and bond.
Right.
So like even if you have a June and a July barrel, those are 2 separate distillate seasons. So you could not combine them into a bottled and bond product.
It's from what, 1897?
Yes, the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897.
Yeah. So we got some history behind there. Old rules.
Yes. It is a very popular brand of theirs. It won double gold in San Francisco in
bottle.
In 2019 and again in 2021.
Okay.
And San Francisco Wine and Spirits, that's the biggest wine and spirits judging contest there is. They just had that a couple weeks ago, and there were a lot of local distilleries that won some.
Yeah, it's
accolades.
cool to see that. Yeah.
So this is one of those. It's won double gold twice. On the back of it says Rittenhouse Straight Rye Whiskey is a storied Pennsylvanian style rye. So shout out to Bobby Hirschman, whose heritage commemorates Philadelphia's famous Rittenhouse Square. Still bottled and bond under U.S. government supervision to meet the strictest requirements, the Rittenhouse you enjoy today carries forth the distinct and spicy flavor profile established long ago. And does say distilled and bottled by Heaven Hill down in Bardstown, Kentucky. So
you said Pennsylvania rye?
Yes. Well, yeah, that's the heritage to it. Because back when this was first a product, like this was a very popular product in the Northeast.
Okay.
So Pennsylvania, like the Connecticut, Maine, like that area, it was a very popular whiskey there.
Kind of an old school label branding here, right?
Yes, very old school. Doesn't have much flash to it.
No, and even probably can't see it too much here. Let me bear with me, Ash. You can take a look at it too here.
Yeah.
But if you can kind of see the color scheme here.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, it's very old school. Like it almost looks like a washed out white. You know what I mean? It's kind of yellowed white where the bottle and bond and everything else. I think it kind of has that kind of just on a bar. It kind of looks like it was
vintage.
Yeah,
very vintage. Exactly.
Yeah, and with the foil they put on the neck and the top of it, it doesn't have an individual, that bottled and bond seal that goes over top. It's actually part of that neck foil that goes on the bottle.
Yeah.
But so what do you think this is a 95% rye mash bill? Do you think this is something lower?
It's tough for me because I want to say it is at least 90, it's the 95.5 type of a thing.
So this is a 51% rye mash bill. So just enough for it to be qualified as a rye whiskey. So 51% rye, 37% corn, and 12% malted barley. So kind of how I was explaining to someone at the function I was at last night, like this is a rye for people who may not like ryes yet, or they haven't really dabbled in ryes, but they like bourbon, they like whiskey. This being that 51%, it's kind of a gateway to ryes. Woodford does the same thing. Their rye is a 53% rye mash bill. And we've had that on before.
Yeah.
The reason why this made the news a little bit last year in some circles, so there was a very large and famous trial last year with a gentleman whose last name was Rittenhouse.
Okay.
oh
And
no.
yes.
What do you mean? What do you mean? I don't recall.
Something
to do with Johnny Depp, right?
Yeah. Something had to do with Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yeah. So what happened after that trial, when that person was acquitted on all charges, there were people who were buying this bottle as a celebration.
Oh, come on.
And Heaven Hill actually issued a statement asking people not to do that.
Oh my gosh.
They're like, if you're buying this bottle to celebrate that person being acquitted, don't.
So, yeah.
So that's how they kind of made.
I wonder what that statement actually read. How it read, like if it was like we trying to stay neutral from that, or if it was like an against the acquittal. You know what I'm saying? You could take it anyway, but I'm wondering what like the actual the wording of it was. I would hope that it would be Heaven Hill saying like we don't want to be associated with the coincidence of the name for this overall umbrella thing.
The way I read it was they didn't want people buying this to celebrate what had happened. Like, however they felt about the situation, they just didn't want people going out and buying this because of what had happened. So, but yeah.
All right. While you tell me what you think of this, tell all of us what you think of this. I am going to see if Rittenhouse Rye statements.
So this is actually
on Google.
This has actually gotten better the more I drank it.
Conservatives outraged. Oh, no shit.
I mean, it does have a little bit of spice to it, but not as much spice as, say a 95% mash bill. It's got some sweetness, and it's got a lot of fruit notes to it as well. Like a little bit of cinnamon on the finish. But it's very oily.
It is. Like a lot of legs.
Yeah. It's a very thick whiskey that definitely coats your palate. Short on the finish. It's not necessarily a finish that sits there and lingers for too long. Like it'll sit there and hang around for a few seconds, but it's not one of those, like some of those barrel proofs that we've had before where it just sits on your palate for long after you finish that sip. But yeah, there's a lot of different, and again, it all depends on, what your palate is like. There's some people that, get more sweetness, some people that get more dryness. Some people say they get banana from it.
Nope.
Which, when I was talking to the head distiller for a local distillery last night, he was telling me that with rye whiskeys, apparently banana is a flavor that people chase when they're drinking rye whiskeys. I'd never heard that.
Explain chase. Like they're looking for it, or they want that out of a rye.
They're looking for a rye whiskey that has that note to it.
Why?
I don't know. I guess it's just a traditional flavor with older rye whiskeys, and so people kind of hunt that out as kind of an ode to, long ago whiskeys. So
I don't like it.
You don't like this, or you don't like that?
No, I think this is fine. I don't like the whole, banana search going on.
Yeah,
I don't get it. I mean, I feel like banana is fine by itself as something to eat. I think banana as like a candy flavor is one of the worst. Like in runts, like
that's my favorite.
Agree. Oof.
Yeah, I like the oof usage. The banana is your favorite
of the runts. Yeah.
Huh.
I also get.
That says a lot about you as a person.
What
about? Go on. I do have the statement pulled up here. It was a Twitter link. It was a Twitter statement on this whole thing.
I also get a little bit of clove on this as well.
I can see that.
Yeah. What do you guys think, real quick, before Steve reads this tweet from Heaven Hill?
And thanks for bearing with us, Ash. I know you're not drinking the same, but
no, it's cool.
Yeah.
I love hearing about it.
Okay, good. Sean, how much banana are you getting over there?
I'm not getting much banana.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm dealing with allergies right now, so I'm kind of a little congested. So I don't know if that's why the taste seems a little off for me, but I think I definitely get the cinnamon, but I also get I said it before the show started, like almost cough syrupy, and that could be having to do with like just because of my.
I mean, I can take the bags of grass out of the garage. I'm
That
sorry.
has nothing to do with it.
That was because you came over on Sunday. I didn't want grass all over the backyard.
That has nothing to do with it. I've had allergies well before this.
It's actually there's like so where we're at in Columbus, Ohio. It's this whole week is just way up there.
Yeah, pollen's insane
my
right
teeth
now.
hurt even. Like,
Yeah.
2 days ago it was 80 degrees, and now it's in the 40s. I think.
Yeah.
Around 50.
Got a little warmer, but now we're actually back in like spring weather here.
Yeah, it's slowly working its way back up, and then we'll have a blizzard. Then it'll be 90 again. So, but yeah, I'm getting a little bit of heat, not much, a little bit of cinnamon, but I just got a weird, like once it's an aftertaste, it's kind of
not a fan.
No, it just kind of coughs, and I like to try this when I'm not.
Do you drink cough syrup normally, or
no? Okay. But it reminds me of it when I do drink it.
When you did drink it,
yeah.
Back in the day, we had the cough syrup.
It's got the Robitussin finish.
Yeah. the OHLQ, which is the state of Ohio liquor control, on the finish they say soft vanilla and baking spices.
Get a little vanilla. Shannon, you want to chime in here on that? You're not drinking it.
He's not drinking this. He's drinking that.
He's not drinking the swill. Drinking high end stuff. All right. So maybe that band is fancy enough for you.
But then another one said maple like spiciness.
Not getting much maple. I get a little bit of vanilla. I get, it's not even cinnamon. It's just some sort of
that baking spice.
Yeah, baking spice. Yes, there's a bit of a spice to it.
Another one said nutmeg.
Yeah.
Which again, baking spice.
Yeah.
But it does have a bit of sweetness to it, more than. So that was the whole thing when you. Remember I said, I was like, I want to say it's 95.5, but, and then you rattle off the mash bill.
It's 37%.
I was going to say there's more sweetness there, which is going to be something that for me I would be surprised if it was 95.5 because of the sweetness.
Yeah.
With the extra corn, I get it a bit more.
It doesn't have as much spice or those floral notes that we typically get in a higher rye mash bill, like a 95% rye tends to have a lot more of those floral and spice notes to it.
I know it's not always the case, but because you've had some 95.5 ryes that are lower price, but I think there's a trend in the industry that a lot of the ryes carry a little bit more of a price tag.
Traditionally, they do.
I wonder if that's the grain itself.
It is.
They don't buy it as much in bulk like they do the corn. It's not as readily available. You have to get it from other places.
Yep.
It's not just as locally sourced. This is. A lot of times there's the Canadian rye, there's the, all that stuff. So here's the tweet, because I feel like we would be a disservice if we don't talk about this. This is Heaven Hill on Twitter, We have been disheartened to learn that some individuals and businesses have been using our Rittenhouse Straight Rye Whiskey brand to celebrate the Kyle Rittenhouse case verdict, despite the profound loss of life from those events. There's no link between our Rittenhouse Rye brand, which was started post-prohibition to commemorate Rittenhouse Square, and in this case, it is our strongly held belief that in serious matters such as this, where lives were lost and people deeply affected, there is no cause for celebration, but instead deep reflection on how we can make the world a more peaceful and respectful place for all. I think that was a very political, trying to separate themselves from that situation.
Yeah.
And however you word that, you're going to either piss off people or you're going to make them, like, oh, good, you're against that, or you're against that. I think if you read the entire, I hate saying this, but the entire tweet, you read the entire statement, I think they did kind of the blanket thing of like, hey, this is more of a serious situation that you shouldn't be buying our product to like cheers to what happened.
Well,
I don't know.
When I was looking up more information on this bottle, you know how when you do a Google search, it'll actually say, they'll have different questions that, about that product, like what's the price, who owns it, what's the mash bill. But there were a lot, one of the more popular ones is this associated in any way with Kyle Rittenhouse?
Yeah.
Like that was a very popular thing. It's like, oh yeah, some 20-year-old kid definitely like, yeah, this is his brand name.
They're not sponsoring. Yeah, they're not sponsoring that. So we're gonna get to the roll through here, part one here. I do like Sean. I'm gonna put this one up on the screen. I don't know if you saw this.
I forgot to mention in the state of Ohio, $26.99 for this bottle.
See, that's a hell of a price. That's where I was talking about that price tag. Yeah, Sean. On a sidebar, she does look awfully comfortable in that bathroom. I don't have one that comfortable in my house.
I am very comfortable right now.
You have a blanket on? Did I see a blanket?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I got blankets and pillows. I'm so comfy. I'm just lounging over here.
Not the first time doing this, I can tell.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. All right, so this is where at the end of part one here, and for those that are new to the podcast, we roll through the end of part one. We do this part of it, which is a rating time, and then we'll round out part one. We'll do a quick intermission, which does stay live on the feed, but it'll be part two on the audio, and that'll be the part two Beyond the BS. But this is the time of we do the rating. And so we do 3 ratings, and you can do actually a rating for the whiskey on the drink that you have, Ash, as well. Remind everyone what you're drinking, but 10 being the best, there'll be 3 ratings, 10 being the best for the whiskey, the cigar, and the pairing of how it all goes together and for whatever reason. So Ash, go ahead. Or do you want to hear someone in the garage do it first?
Yeah, you guys go ahead. Let me hear you.
Sean, you want to get in there?
Sure. For the cigar, I'm like Shannon said earlier, I've never had a bad one. No one's ever said anything bad about it. It's always been one of my favorites. I was just telling him a couple of years ago, that was like Shannon and I's go-to when we would like have a fire or something. I'd always go and get those because
Which one?
The My Father, like I think, do you remember which one it was?
I know nothing about My Father.
Okay. I don't think it was this one, but everyone I've had so far have been amazing.
Okay.
I mean, they're just always such a great cigar. So the cigar itself, I'll give it a 9 because I've never had a problem with it. I've always enjoyed them. The
Rittenhouse Rye Bottled and
Rittenhouse
Bond.
Rye. I'm going to give it a 7.5, and I could maybe go higher because I like to try it again when I'm not dealing with allergies because I think it would be maybe taste a little bit different just because of what I said earlier. But the combine the two, they're not too bad. I mean, I say the combination of the two make it an 8, but again, I think my smell's all jacked up right now, but overall an 8. But again, I'm always excited to have a My Father cigar, so that's what I'm gonna go to.
So the pairing was an 8.
Yeah,
I got you. Yeah. Shane, you want to rate anything here for the?
He can rate the cigar.
Well, he's drinking the Basil Hayden toast as well, so you can do the cigar and then maybe the pairing with the toast.
Yeah, for the cigar, I really enjoy it. It's been a really good smoke. Oh,
It's all right, buddy. Hey, it's all right.
Let's cut.
No. We got. It's fine. It's what
Cut
the
and
sponsors, table skirt is for. I'll use my jeans for my phone. It's fine. It's supposed to be waterproof. I don't know what bourbon proof. Rye proof, excuse me.
Cut, take 2, and here we go.
No one saw or heard anything. Go ahead.
It's been a really good smoke. I've enjoyed the construction, the smoke quality. The construction's been really great.
Here, buddy.
Oh.
With the I've been sipping on the Basil Hayden's toast, and it's really brought out the sweetness in the bourbon.
Yeah,
Like it might be take it up a little too much with the sweetness on the bourbon. Just a touch, but nothing too bad. But the pairing I'd give a probably with the sweetness maybe a 7.5 for both. But I'm really enjoying the cigar. Cigar I'd give a 9. Basil Hayden's 8.
Nice. All right, Ash, you want to try this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
The cigar was beautiful. Definitely got the leathery notes, but I still haven't gotten those cherry notes that I got the last time.
Okay.
But of course, beautiful construction, smoking really well. I definitely give the cigar a 9. And for my bourbon, the Woodford and Luxardo, I didn't really like. So I just finished that one. I'd give that mixing like a 2. I didn't enjoy it. It was sad. So now I'm just doing straight Woodford, and I love Woodford. I give Woodford like an 8.
So it's better without the Luxardo.
It is.
Stick with the bourbon.
Yes.
Nate, how about you?
So on the whiskey, initially, I was kind of right there with Sean. I was at a 7.5 on this whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
As I've gotten into it a little bit more, I actually like it a little bit more, but that could be because I'm smoking the cigar with it.
Okay.
But there's a lot more flavor, and it's a lot thicker on the palate as I've been drinking it. So it's actually been a little bit more enjoyable. So initially I was a 7.5. Now I'd be more around an 8 for it. But I'll stick with my initial by itself pre-podcast 7.5. The cigar, just like everyone else so far, I'm a 9 on the cigar. Really enjoy the cigar. This is a great blend from them. A lot of flavor, very rich, not a full body cigar, but very well balanced. A lot of complexity, a lot of flavor going on with the cigar. And then the pairing, I give the pairing an 8.5 because going these two back to back, I think the cigar, and it's funny when Shannon was talking about drinking the Basil Hayden with this cigar, how he got more sweetness out of the Basil Hayden toast.
Yeah.
Same thing with this. I've gotten more sweetness out of this Rittenhouse Rye while smoking this cigar. And so, like I said, maybe that's the reason why, as this first part's gone on, the whiskey's been tasting a little bit better. It just, it could be because of the cigar. So on the pairing, I'm an 8.5.
All right. I'm not getting as much sweetness, I guess. I get a little bit, like I said, based off the mash bill, possibly because of the extra corn in that, right? You know what I mean? The whiskey, bringing that price point, I mean, $26 for a bottle that is actually, it's different. It isn't blowing me away when I see something that's going to be a rye that I like.
Mm-hmm.
Based on at 20-some bucks, I'm going to be shocked that I really like it. There was the Ezra Brooks, was it?
Yeah, the Ezra Brooks rye.
That one surprised me.
And that was a 95% rye that used to be on the shelf. Regular price was a $20 bottle.
Right. So like price point alone, I think, this is an approachable bottle. I enjoy it. It's not something that I would have to have in stock in my private bar at my house. You know what I mean? This is not one that I rave about. I've talked about on the podcast. I love ryes as well. Nate's definitely a rye guy, but there's a handful that I really like. I always bring them up, like the Willet. Mm-hmm. The now 4-year that they have, the E.H. Taylor straight rye. Absolutely love. This isn't gonna be in that kind of ballpark, but I mean, I give it for price point 7.
Okay.
So I mean, it's a good bottle. It'd be a good mixer. It's okay to sip on.
I was going to ask you whether or not you thought this would be a good mixer.
Yeah.
I was thinking with the sweetness there, even though it's not an overwhelming sweetness in the mash bill, I was almost concerned about like how this would be in an old fashioned or a Manhattan.
This would be a sweeter Manhattan.
Yeah.
But it would be a nice cocktail. It'd be something different to do with a traditional Manhattan with this. I think this would be, again, a more approachable Manhattan too for people that don't typically care for whiskey cocktails. So that's where giving it a 7 is, this isn't a go-to for me. But I mean, again, I don't mind sipping on this neat. I think with an ice cube, it would be easy to drink, not even trying to open. You can open yours up. I'm not going to do that on mine. It drinks like 100 proof, like it says. But yeah, the cigar, I'm with you guys. I think, right in that 9 range for the cigar. I think that this has been kind of a resounding thing for everyone, is that this cigar is, you got to like a bit of a fuller bodied smoke though. I think that, and I think the audience, including you, Ash, you say you smoke fuller body stuff. If you smoke even Nicaraguan tobacco, but you like more of the medium, you don't like as much strength, this may not be your go-to out of even the My Father line. I really think that they've got some other stuff that you might be a bigger fan of if you're more medium body smokers. But this is something that I'm going to give a 9. I love the construction. And I mentioned earlier, it's a little softer than I recall. I don't know if that's just with the weather spikes and everything here in Columbus, Ohio, that this kind of got a little soft over the last week or so. But it's smoking beautifully.
Absolutely.
Smoking beautifully. And so the pairing, I'm going to give an 8. I think the pairing's an 8. I think that I would pick something else to drink with this, possibly even like a Woodford, like a bourbon with this one. I think that the pairing would be, I wouldn't necessarily pick a rye with the Le Bijou.
Okay.
Off the top, it's, just gut feeling on that. I think a bourbon would be a bit better.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. Jonathan's throwing up some comments here. I'm just trying to keep up with it. That being said, guys, I want to say happy Whiskey Wednesday. Ash, thank you for being with us for part 1.
Yeah.
I hope that you are still in for part 2.
I'm in.
And that's going to be strength.
You guys will have me. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It's going to be strength and community is the topic tonight. So before we tune out, I don't know.
Before we take a break.
Take a break. Yeah. Want to thank patreon.com. We had a couple people mentioning about that. Patreon.com/Bourbon and BS podcast. There's 3 tiers on there if you guys want to get on there. And you also will get some swag if you do that for a period of time, or depending on the tier. And also Venmo at Bourbon and BS. If you want to buy us a bottle, just tell us what to buy. Hopefully we can follow through with that. Tinderbox at Easton for the My Father Le Bijou. Thank you very much here in Columbus, Ohio. If you guys want to try that cigar, any of the other My Father cigars, if you want to try one of our other sponsors, like something from Altadis, we got that Upman Nicaragua coming up from AJ Fernandez next.
The original Upman by AJ.
Yep. With the blue band on it. And then also BS Cigar Company Gold and Silver are available at Tinderbox at Easton as well, or through the podcast. If you want those, just reach out to us and we will point you in the right direction. And once again, if you like what you're looking at there, buyjack.com/bourbon and BS. We got some clothes. You too, man. He's got the podcast shirt on in red and black. It's going to be the pour one more, light up another. We'll figure this out together. It's buyjack.com/bourbon and BS. That's going to be great. And I need to work with them now that we're all on the same page, possibly doing an orange shirt for the charity that Aiden was a part of as well.
Yeah. Hitching for the homeless.
Yep. So he's working with, I forget what the
DePaul, USA.
And that's for raising money for homelessness and the awareness of that situation we have here in America mainly, right? But I think they're international as well.
Yes, they are international. They're headquartered, I believe, in the U.S.
Yeah.
But they are international.
So I think that's what we're leaning towards. Maybe orange because there's been demand for that, but also other swag on there as well. Guys, happy Whiskey Wednesday. Stay tuned for part 2 if you're listening live. Take a quick break. Cheers.
Cheers.
What happened?
I went to grab my notebook. I slid the notebook over, and
what'd you do?
It bumped into the mic stand, and the mic just.
We just had a Venmo contribution here.
Nice.
Yes. It's from Kristen, who previously did that as well to buy a bottle for us.
Was that the restoration?
She says, redeeming myself from the Listerine. Never going to live that one down.
Oh, you shouldn't have said it.
Thank you very much, Kristen, for the donation. We'll have to pick out another bottle here.
And that was just for like whatever bottle. Because people can't specify.
Yeah, you can specify or, do it. Yeah. But thank you very much. And anyone else that has been contributing, thank you very much. Ash, you need a break?
I don't know. I'm okay. You need a break?
I was going to say, she doesn't have to go far.
I know.
You just have to mute your mic.
Yeah.
Turn the camera off. You good?
Yeah, but no, doing that kind of like when you joked about pouring it on my lap, that's what happened Saturday. I was hanging out at Fido next door and met a guy who tunes into the podcast. I hadn't met him before, and his arms flailed and he knocked a full pint of Guinness right into my lap. So like I wasn't even drinking and he knocked a Guinness in my lap. I'm like, well, this is gonna be fun if I get pulled over on my drive home. Like how do I
of alcohol?
How do I explain that to a cop? Like, no, seriously, this guy spilled a drink on me. Smell my jeans. Like
Don't ask the cops to smell your jeans ever. It's just bad advice.
No, I would just
officer, seriously, smell my pants. Yeah.
No,
get in there real deep, like.
No,
sir, step out of the car.
No, literally, if that happened, I'd light up a cigar to try and mask the smell.
Absolutely. Just take your pants off. That's another good one.
You can drive like that.
All right, you guys ready for part 2 here? Not really sure.
Hold on. I'm going to get another cigar.
All right.
All right.
Upman, Nicaragua.
My wife sent me a text. She goes, "Yay for not being very Russian tonight."
Yeah. Yeah.
Jess, it's a rye whiskey. Why would it be peaty? Like that doesn't make any sense.
Don't call her out. Just respond back to her. She's.
Can I grab Teresa Webster spoon for her dish? Can I grab that? It's a big white thing.
It might be in the dishwasher. Check the dishwasher. I mean, it's clean, but I don't know. It might be in the dishwasher.
Okay. She just said, "Don't forget." I'm like, all right.
And while we're taking this little break, so people that are on the Bourbon and BS community page or that follow me on social media, I've hinted the last 24 hours about a tasting I was at yesterday, and some people have been asking me questions exactly what it was for. So per the agreement with the distillery, it was Watershed, but per their agreement with OHLQ, we can't divulge details until tomorrow at 11:30 in the morning. But
they have to announce it first, basically.
Yes, they have to. They have to put out the announcement, and then we can post stuff about it. It was a group of 14 individuals. Some of them are people that do podcasts that involve whiskey. One member there works for the Chamber of Commerce in the state of Ohio.
Tell them more about it later.
I was just doing killing time.
I know.
Until she came back.
She's back.
And she is now.
Just trying.
I didn't want to stop like mid-sentence, so yeah.
Stay tuned. You can find out more about what Nate was doing last night. Shortly. Not now.
And I heard something I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
Bourbon TikToker.
Yeah.
I get it, but
makes sense.
Yeah, the last 4 people that introduced themselves, like, yeah, I'm a bourbon TikToker. Like, all right.
How'd you introduce yourself?
I introduced myself by my name and said I'm co-host of the Bourbon and BS podcast located right here in Columbus, Ohio.
Nice.
And I even wore this shirt and the Bourbon and BS barrelhead hoodie.
Saw it.
So
it's nice. Way to represent. Yeah. Why is it wet here?
We know why.
For those tuning in right now. Perfect. She mad that you called her out?
So her PD comment was more of responding to your Listerine comment.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Welcome back to the Bourbon and BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 218. This is part 2, Beyond the BS, and we are still fortunate to be joined by Ash from Ashes with Ash. We're just going to keep calling you Ash. Ash, do you ever say your full name?
My name is Ashley Ott. I just go by Ash. Yeah.
Ash. Okay. And Ash has been with us since the beginning of the episode tonight, and she is coming from us from New York City. From her bathtub, her studio.
Woohoo.
Some people have home studios in the garage, basements.
Too fancy for me.
Yeah. It's a new one for me, but I think it's impressive. So we appreciate you being with us. We covered a little bit of, when we were talking about part 2, no one really had a topic tonight. I picked tonight strength and community because I think that, obviously you had reached out to the podcast, and I don't know if you've done that to other podcasts that you follow or heard about, but thinking about doing a collaboration. And I think everyone's got the common interest of not only doing something through a podcast format, but also, cigars was a big one. And then you had mentioned something about the fact that we do it with the whiskey and bourbon typically, but it was just a kind of a common hobby / interest. And I think that was kind of a good basis for a part 2 topic of that, because one of the things I will say that was on my mind was just this last Sunday, I did have some people over at the house, and Sean, at the end of the night, I'm not going to but one of the things was just like a handful of us. It just was kind of that late night conversation, and someone brought up a question about the top 3 things that were issues, and then it was, well, what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
And one of my responses, because the top, kind of the conversation was, I think people need to really focus, and we've talked about it on the podcast before in part 2, and Nate, you even took it further, but it's starting with your home life, getting your home life in check, your inner circle in check before you spend most of your waking hours worried about strangers halfway across the world or different areas of the country or whatever you've never met, but you're more concerned about them than you are with people that you know and have common interests in. Like, it's not about dividing, but it's like you got to start locally, if you will, in your own circle, and then you can branch out with the strength that you have with that. So I thought, that was something that would be something that we could do with the strength and community, is that, meeting Ash, we can do partly find out a bit more about you and how you got into the cigar industry, how you got into the podcasting. But it's something that I think at least there's a commonality there, that's when you actually do have those conversations with people, like you said on your podcast. I'll let you kind of take it further on that, as far as you said that it's just, you kind of you don't go in with much of a format. It's more just like kind of hanging out at a cigar lounge or shop, and you start talking about life and talking about things that you don't even know, but just the fact that common interest, the community there, brought those people together, and that's when the conversation happens, as opposed to going in with an agenda, which I love hearing. So Ash, if you could give us a little bit, like you talked about in the first part, that you work for Davidoff, the lounge in New York City, been there about 8 months, but kind of what got you into the cigar community and why?
Yeah, so it was mostly my family. My dad has a lounge in Virginia, Lynchburg, Virginia. It's called Pap Cigar Company. It's named after my pap, my grandfather. They all smoke cigars, and I even have an episode called My Family History, which is really interesting because my dad really dug into the family history, and it dates back to the 1800s, my family and cigars. And then it just grows from there. It's really, really cool. It's a good episode. Good episode to start with, too, if anyone wants to listen to my podcast.
And you're just primarily through podcast apps, is that correct?
Exactly. I'm on all platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, everything like that. I don't do video or YouTube or anything yet, just audio right now. But yeah, all podcast platforms.
All right.
Yeah. So I kind of got into it because of my family, and that's probably another reason why I started the podcast, just that lounge experience that I kind of grew up in, just talking to people, having conversations. And that was the initial idea with my podcast, is that I'd go to different cigar lounges and just talk to people there. But, with COVID, it was a little difficult. And there's actually not a whole lot of cigar lounges here in New York. So I just ended up going to Instagram and finding so many people and so many women in the cigar industry, in this community. It's been so cool to find, like, that it's a thing. Cigars are a thing, and it's kind of a bigger community, but it's actually pretty small. It's small, but it's big.
It's tightly knit. And then up on the screen there, if you guys are watching, if you follow right now in the comments, Jonathan Herring put a link up to yours on, looks like Apple.
Thank you, Jonathan Herring.
I got it on Spotify right now.
Shannon's got it on Spotify there.
Sweet. Yes, I am from Lynchburg. Who are you, Sean Anderson?
Sean is a longtime podcast listener and patron, and he lives in Eastern Tennessee.
Okay.
Kingsport.
He's very much a Appalachian type of guy.
Cool.
Great dude though. Travels well with
both.
Travels well with whiskey.
Yeah, he's a big supporter. He's been on the podcast before, and then he was also
Cool.
up recently for it was Patty's Day weekend for the Smoking Tent event here in Columbus, Ohio. So he came up and
Nice.
yeah, fantastic individual, big supporter.
Yeah,
Cool.
But so you started you were saying that, like, the community or whatever, you were meeting all these people, and it seems both very kind of wide, but also very tightly knit. I feel like, you know what I mean? It's not. I mean, cigar smokers it's a small subculture of the U.S., the world. I mean, this is not something that everyone does.
Right.
But what have you found about the community since you've really, I guess, like, kind of you dive into your family history? You were, how long have you been smoking cigars, I guess, would be one appropriate question.
I've been smoking cigars for about 10 years, and then more consistently the past 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I found just in the community, really the biggest shock was how many people there were. Because they say, it's like 1% of the population of people smoke cigars, something like that. I think it's more now, honestly.
Probably after the last few years, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's a great community. Everyone is so welcoming. I haven't had any mean people that I've talked to in the cigar community.
Stick around.
Really cool. I was about to say, you may not have been in it long enough.
Well, of course, there's always the one guy or the one group at the lounge that likes to talk a bunch of shit, but not my lounge.
Yeah, your lounge.
Yeah, being a Davidoff lounge, that's a little high class.
There's no pretentious people at a Davidoff lounge in New York City. I refuse to believe it. Everyone in there is the salt of the earth.
Yes.
More like salty. No.
All right. But so, yeah, I mean, so with that, though, I mean, what do you do with your podcast? Give us a little bit more on that. I do want to give you an opportunity, at least with our audience. Obviously, a couple of other people have already subscribed to it. But I mean, what you started it, you had this family history, and I do want to look up that episode that was with, you said, your father, correct?
Yes. Yeah. It's called My Family History. Yeah.
And you said it's only on the podcast apps, which is fantastic to have that. Do you go back and edit through that stuff, or is it pretty raw?
Oh, yeah. I edit a lot. I listen to the whole thing. I don't always edit, but I definitely listen to the whole thing just to be sure it all sounds right and there's no ers and ahs and stuff like that.
We don't do that.
Yeah.
I know so many people that don't do that. It gives me so much anxiety.
This is basically it. I find that break or the intermission, and then I do, here's part one, here's part two.
No, I'm like, I made a weird laugh or a weird noise at one point. I got to edit that out.
Nope.
Yeah.
You will not be edited on this one.
That's okay.
There's a gentleman I met last night that does one on YouTube. Like, my wife's watched his podcast on YouTube, and there's definitely a lot of editing that goes into his, and from the time he films it to the time he posts it, there's a decent amount of time in there to do that. Whereas ours is just, this all the faults and good things with it. You get it all.
I love it.
Especially towards the end of them.
Or when I spill a glass.
Yeah, that happens. It's like you're there in the garage. But so like, what have you found as far as, when you interview these people, like, what does the conversation lead to typically, or is it always different?
So a lot of people that I interview have never really done podcasts before, and they're always like, why do you want to interview me? I don't really feel like I have anything to say, and blah, blah, blah. And they're kind of nervous at first, and I'm nervous too. Every podcast, I'm nervous. So I'm like, don't worry, it's going to be great. We're just going to talk. We're just going to have conversation. So that's the one thing I found, is that people that think they don't have a story, they totally have a story.
100%.
And it's just been so cool to learn how people have gotten into cigars and their background, and then just random things about their life. We just kind of veer off. It's pretty cool.
Sounds like our part too.
Yeah.
Well, and
love it.
We get a lot of compliments, both from people in the cigar community and in the whiskey community, that potentially do a lot of other podcasts in either one of those industries. And that's one of the things that we hear the most often after we wrap up is, it's not just an interview about that person in their industry. Like it's a little bit deeper and more personal than that. And, talking about the life topic every week, it's not just the same, like for the cigar people, it's not just, what's your blend, where's the tobacco from, how long do you age it, and stuff like that. Or with the whiskey, how long do you age it, what's your mash bill, and, nerd out with either one of those industries. It's a little bit more down to earth and personable. And we have found with both of those industries that people that come in, even if they've done podcasts before, they're still a little bit nervous about doing a podcast. But then when they find out that all we're doing is having a personal conversation with them, they definitely loosen up and, talk about it a little bit more and have a little bit more fun with it.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, the whiskey helps, obviously. let's be honest here.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when it goes 3 hours or so.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, let me ask you, like, on that kind of that train of thought there. I mean, have you found that with yours, or being in the cigar community now, especially in the industry? You said, people coming into the lounge you work at, do you have arguments with people, like not yourself, I mean, necessarily, but like, do you see arguments happen a lot when people disagree, or do you see more of the fact that it's like they agree to disagree on certain topics, or how do you see those conversations play out? Because clearly we've been in some polarizing times recently, especially, you said you've been working there 8 months or so. So on the outside of the other side of the COVID shutdowns and everything like that. But I mean, how do you, I guess, describe the interactions between people versus what you see outside of the cigar community?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of agree to disagree. Not a lot of full arguments. It's usually civil. People say their opinions, but they end up shaking hands at the end of the day, Which
doesn't happen a lot of arenas in life at this point.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Cigars bring everyone together, though. I think everyone realizes that we have this one thing in common. And whether it's a negative topic or not, we're having a conversation. So it's worth it.
Yeah, there was a time you weren't supposed to talk about politics or religion or anything, of that nature in a cigar shop or in other, other arenas, like I said. But I mean, now that it's hard to get away from that. It really is. So, I mean, those topics do come up, and they're still coming up. And, I'm all for it to a point. But, I was listening to another podcast today briefly, and, there was someone that was spending a lot of time in Europe, and they were portraying this kind of view of people from certain countries that they look at the U.S. and it's like, we disagree over here a lot about politics, about religion, about certain, big topics, but we don't hate each other for it like as much, like they look at what's happening and has happened in the U.S. and it's just these I say polarized type of topics, but it's just these viewpoints that if even people that a lot of times, and that's where I was kind of getting at with the whole I guess talking point of the fact that you have to really start with people that and that are in your family and yourself first and all that stuff, is that people were the last few years, several years now at this point, I mean, they're shutting down relationships because of a disagreement on something that could be what they think is so large. But and I can respect people that have this identity with certain topics, certain issues, but I mean, it was just issue after issue, and it was like there's very little respect for someone that thinks differently than you. But to your point, talking about the agree to disagree thing that you see in the cigar community, that's it. The strength in community is the fact that it's like, no, like your neighbors disagree with you. People that, do some like certain hobbies or groups you're involved in, when you actually are living your life around people, they're going to disagree with you on certain things. But does that mean you write them off, or now they're an enemy? Because I think that's what we're dealing with a lot of times. And that's kind of what I want to talk. Like, that's what made me think of this, is that it's like, in the cigar lounge on podcast doing this stuff, we don't know you. I don't know you, Ash. Like, we don't know you. You could have completely different political views. You can have completely different, religious views. You can have all that stuff, and we could talk about that stuff. And it's like at the end of the podcast, it's like, really appreciate you talking about it and opening up. That's it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like, fuck that person. Like, never like block, like I'm gonna talk bad about you. I'm gonna like do all that stuff. It's just there's no win there.
I think in our personal circles we're a little bit more divisive, but I think in the cigar industry there's a little bit more of a sense of community, because I've seen it at the shop. So in the back of the tinderbox, there's about 5-6 shares, and I have seen times where when they've been talking about a whatever political or national issue it was literally 5 against 1. 5 people had one viewpoint, and there was this one lone person that someone on the outside would look at it and like, man, everyone's like attacking that one person. But then when they all get up and leave, it's like, all right, hey, I'll see you tomorrow when I'm here. Like they always come back. Like, they don't sit there and they have these disagreements with people in the shop and then just stop coming to the shop, or they see that or they walk in and go, oh, so-and-so's here. I'm just going to get my cigars and leave. No, they're going to go right back down and sit in one of those chairs again. And, they're not necessarily going to talk about what they had just talked about the last time. Something else is going to come up, but all those people that disagreed with them the last time they were in there, they're getting along. They're telling jokes. They're laughing. Like, they're supporting one another. Like, they were expressing their viewpoints to one another, but at the same time, it was not out of spite or malice. And so they still had this mentality of, we may disagree on this, but I hope I see you again tomorrow.
Yeah, the only reason I think is if you're just your social skills, or you're just
it's true. Yeah.
Unless you're just abrasive or annoying as fuck, then it's like, all right, no, I'm not gonna see you tomorrow. I don't want to see you tomorrow. It has nothing to do with what you believe in or anything else. It's just you bug the piss out of me.
Right.
Who you are as a person. Like, and I can respect that a lot more.
Yeah.
Ray Chester, who's tuning in, you don't know Ray, but we do. No, he's a good friend of ours, but he's tuning in from Vietnam, and used to live here in Ohio. Good friend of the show. But I do want to just throw this out there, and then we can go back to the conversation, and he can comment on this. But he says, "Oh, really? You don't hate each other in the U.S.?" And then he comments again, "That's not the perspective from the outside looking in." But then he says, "There's no more selfish society on the face of the earth right now." So I don't know what you're trying to say, Ray. Do we or don't we? What's the perspective there? I feel like you're contradicting yourself.
He says that, and yet he traveled halfway across the earth to come to a cigar event last month.
It was but I mean, that's what I'm curious what his comment is on that, as far as what the outside perspective is. Again, being in Vietnam, he's from the UK. He lived here, so there is an outsider perspective. I'm just relaying what I heard on a show. That was an outside looking in. But Ash, like, you say you don't find that very often, in the cigar community. Do you find it? You're in New York City, which again, that's another thing. kind of from an outsider perspective, you guys were how long you've been in New York City? Let me ask that first.
About, oh man, almost 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys were a focal point in the news throughout those 3 years.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, I
So,
only got about 6 months in before the pandemic hit, before the shutdown hit. So I'm just now this year starting to really explore the city and everything.
what brought you to New York?
I just wanted to do it. I always loved like big cities. I'm from a small town, and I one day just decided I was going to do it, and I set my mind to it, and 3 months later I was here.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's going all in.
I went all in.
Was it I'm trying not to be too personal, but I mean, was it something that, that was just an aspiration? Were you running away from something at home, as far as like you just wanted a new chapter? I mean, that's a big move for someone.
Yeah, exactly. I think I wanted a new chapter. I was feeling stuck almost in like a repetitive cycle. Everyone around me was just so okay with being comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And just staying in the same place, working the same job, seeing the same people, having the same drama, just the same thing over and over and over. And I was just so desperate for something new, something exciting. And I wanted to be uncomfortable. Everyone's like, I don't know how you live in New York City. Why would you ever want to do that? I want to be uncomfortable because you learn more about yourself when you're uncomfortable. You learn how to be comfortable and get to that place where you feel good with yourself and good about yourself. So I wanted to be in a place that was challenging and not just the same thing over and over and over. I didn't want to be stuck anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it's also a way to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
How's it worked out 3 years?
It's been great. Like I honestly feel better than I ever have in my entire life. I'm just at a really good point in my life right now, and it's been really cool. I've loved the experience.
Does it feel like home?
It really does. Sometimes I'll miss home, like back in Virginia. I'll miss it, and then when I go back, I'm like, okay, everyone is still doing the same thing. Everyone's still doing the same thing. Damn.
I haven't missed anything yet.
Yeah. And then as soon as I get on the plane and I'm back home and I can see all the lights from the plane of the city, I'm just like, oh, I missed it. I missed it so much.
Nice.
Is this the furthest you've been away from home, or the longest time period you've been away from home?
The furthest, yes. I lived in Asheville, North Carolina for a few years, my early 20s. That wasn't too far. It was in like a 4.5 hour drive or so. I was there for about 3 years, so almost as long, yeah.
Shannon, what do you got?
So when you left Virginia for New York, what was on your mind job-wise? Or was it to find a career, what you're doing now with the lounge? Like, how did you get yourself set up and get going once you got to New York and then end up into the lounge?
Yeah, so my goal, I've worked in a lounge before, but most of my experience is in the veterinary field. So my goal was to I got a job before I got here. So my goal was to go work in the veterinary field where I know I could get a job, do that until I find a cigar place. I knew I wanted to work with cigars in the cigar industry. So I got a job with the ASPCA. I managed the medical department and the adoption center. And then they took such good care of us during COVID. I didn't want to leave, and I loved working there. It was great. But then it just got to a point, it's like, I came here to work in cigars. I want to work with cigars, so that's what I'm going to do. So I started looking for it, and I found Davidoff, and everyone was like, you have to take that. Davidoff never hires. People stay with them forever. Yeah.
Did they post something, or did you seek them out? Like, just walked in there and like, I want to work here?
They did post something. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I found it.
Wow.
Well,
all right, Ash, cool. You're my hero on many levels.
Thank you.
Yeah, because Shannon says that, so Shannon and his wife, they literally just sold all their stuff and they're going to buy an RV. And his wife can work remote, and Shannon, his Instagram handle is roaming barber. And that's literally what they're going to do. They're going to get in a truck and RV, go across the U.S., travel, see the world, and he's going to basically cut hair on the road.
You need to get a TikTok.
That's amazing. That's my dream.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite a change of pace. And a couple of years ago, Shannon was a truck driver, and then he left that to pursue a passion as a barber.
Yes,
and he got his barber license right before COVID hit.
You guys share that. You guys share that actually.
Yeah, right.
The timing aspect of life.
Exactly, and that's what I want to do. I would love to travel with this podcast and just get an RV just like that. Go everywhere in the world, meet everyone in the world.
As long as you swing through Columbus.
I graduated barber school January of 20. Got in the barbershop February. The world shut down March. Yeah, so I feel your pain on that one.
God, that's the worst. Oh, that's
You're doing well now, though.
Yes, at least there's that.
So you went to work in the veterinary industry. What's where'd you go to college? What's your education, your major? Like, what made you choose that?
I got nothing. I got no educations. I just started working at a veterinary hospital in Asheville, and then when I moved back home, I got into another vet hospital, and then from there I went into specialty hospitals doing surgery. So I've done all different kinds of hospitals: spay, neuter, small animal, large animal, surgery, specialty, and then on to shelter. So I just had the experience and just went with it.
Gotcha. Roll with it.
Yeah.
So how was the interview? Like, we might as well keep this interview going a little bit here because it's branching off into some other things. And Ray, I know you were commenting about some of the stuff we were talking about earlier about how it was a contradiction. We can come back to that, but with you getting into the cigar industry before the podcast and everything else is. So you didn't have education, but you were making it in the animal world, if you will.
Yeah.
And you wanted to get into the cigar world. Davidoff of all, not only companies, but the New York City storefront is hiring.
Yeah.
And here comes Ash.
Here I come.
Here comes Ashley.
It was the name.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. The podcast came afterwards, correct or no?
Before Davidoff.
It came. Okay.
Yeah.
So how does that pan out? I guess I'm not saying that it shouldn't have. I'm just saying that story there are a lot of people in the cigar industry, not just in New York City, but elsewhere, that would love to be working for the Davidoff Lounge in New York City. Right.
Well, I mean, I had experience at my dad's lounge. I managed that lounge for a couple of years. And then I have my tobacconist license. I went to the Tobacconist University and did all of that. But otherwise, I hate to admit it, but I have a girl advantage. Everyone wants a girl in the lounge.
I was going to say explain that, but I get it. All right. Well, we typically have more viewers when we have a female guest.
Well, I mean,
I get tired of looking it up.
Well,
I don't know if it's true, but
well, I mean, she says that that lounges want to have a female presence, but yet when you look at the number of ladies that are cigar reps or brand ambassadors, there's not as many of them.
No,
right?
Going
they have
back,
a hard time.
Kind of going back to that whole thing, we need to get you hooked up with Laurel from Macanudo because
I would love that.
That is a great. I think there's a lot of parallels there between you guys. You know what I mean? Because she was also, not to really dive into it a whole lot, but she was working at a cigar shop, that type of thing, and it was something where when she was on the podcast first time, that was really the first time I had a really in-depth conversation with her, and it was the fact that she'd be challenged all the time as I
Yeah.
imagine
Oh,
you
yeah.
might be as well. Like, what do you know about cigars? Like, what do you smoke? I'm sure you smoke all those, like, not negative necessarily, but it's like those stereotypes, like what flavored cigars, all that stuff. That's like this, this old,
Exactly.
the good old boy mentality type thing. And then you just rattle off a bunch of shit and it's like, oh, cigars. And then it's all it takes. But then 5 minutes later, that situation presents itself all over again. Laurel has a lot of good stories as well. And again, moving herself up to this brand ambassador at Macanudo and now being with a very large company, being General Cigars. Years later, she still has that same experience.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You know what I mean?
It's crazy.
It really is. It really is.
Well, I mean, this year at the 10 event, she was up on the stage for a Q&A, and she's there next to Eric Espinoza of Espinoza Cigars and Tom Lazuka, who owns Asylum Cigars. So you got two, very prominent individuals in the cigar community, and Macanudo is a very prominent name as well. But it's very different when you see Eric, Tom, and then you got Laurel in the middle. There's a lot of people that if they don't know Laurel, they're like, who is this? What does she do? What does she know? But then when they actually hear her talk about it, they're like, oh shit, she actually knows more than I do.
Yeah.
Which they shouldn't be surprised about, because you can't just get that position and know nothing.
Right. Exactly.
You actually have to know your shit in order to be able to get a position like that. I mean, she was a manager of a store in Milwaukee.
Yep.
And, she, even when she was the manager of that store, she would get that where, someone's like, I want to talk to the manager, or talk about, or talk to someone who may know a little bit more than the person that just started working there a month ago. And they see Laurel and they're like, you run this place? Like, yeah. What do you want to know? What do you want?
Yeah.
I think that goes into, I mean, obviously with the female aspect, but I mean, the age thing also.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How old are you, Ash?
29.
29. So 29, that's also, I think, in a sense, in again, a good old boy industry, not as much anymore. I mean, but I think, in the last 10 years it had been, and I think it's actually evolved, especially in the last.
Definitely.
There's been some positives from the last 2 to 3 years, right? I mean, this is something that created a cigar boom, that people are smoking, that you have those, I would say, more a general stereotypical type of cigar smoker, like a middle-aged male coming in, and they don't know shit about cigars because they just started doing it because they were working from home type thing. So now it's kind of, it's been equalized, I think, a little bit. But again, walking in there, we've had, and I know people that have been younger, that have come through, like Tinderbox at Easton, even, and through the podcast and everything else. You look at some of these people that we've had in even a small shop like that, not a Davidoff, lounge in New York City, but we had a younger individual who's been on, he's coming up on the podcast again. For those that listen, Ryan Newman's going to come back on here next month.
Yeah.
But he started with us at he was probably 21, 22. And now he's the GM of a lounge here in town, and he's killing it, right?
Yeah.
And then we had another individual that I started the podcast. Nate was kind of involved, but it was Jake and myself initially 4 years ago, and he's now 26, 27, and he's the GM of the Burn by Rocky Patel in Indianapolis. So I mean, it's like you have this age thing going on even before the male versus female. That it's just like, they walk in and are like, who's this young kid? Like, he doesn't know shit about cigars. You know what I mean? And they smoke more cigars than anyone else, and it's always having to, I guess, give your own qualifying credentials through conversation with that.
But it's that experience. Kind of like she talked about. Ash doesn't have any formal secondary education in veterinary medicine, but she's worked in that industry. She she has the skills, the knowledge, and experience, and that's how she was able to get that role when she first moved there. That's how I think some of the guys that have come out of the Tinderbox have gotten that as well. Even though they may be young, it's that they have the years of experience and tutelage underneath you and Brian. But then, when Jake first went out there, he was a humidor manager. Mm-hmm. It was his work ethic and the way he handled himself and ran that side of the business that allowed, that provided him the opportunity to be able to move up to be the GM in that position.
Do you still run into that on a daily or frequent basis at Davidoff in this industry? Because I think when we're talking about the topic at hand, strength and community, is that, again, hopefully once people realize, who you're meeting, who you're smoking a cigar with, I don't care what your level of knowledge is.
Mm-hmm.
It's I mean, because we get that all the time in the industry as well. I mean, doing this or, being on the podcast, people like you were listening about the whiskey side of it. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm sorry that we're doing it. And you're like, no, I'm listening. Well, we have whiskey people, the same thing, the cigar side. Like, well, no, I'm learning from, I love this, but it's like, even in the cigar retail side or, in the enthusiast and you're certified tobacconist and everything like that. It's once you, I guess, get past that initial response, I mean, is there more strength or are you just constantly bombarded with that as far as a challenge for you?
Yeah, well, luckily I work with really amazing people, and it happens quite often where I'll go into the humidor with someone, ask them, what are you looking for? Can I help you find anything? And they'll go out of the humidor to go ask the guys a question.
Really?
So
Do they say
often.
anything or just like literally like walk away from you?
Yeah. And then the guys are like, oh, she knows better. Ask her.
We've had a guest that had that same experience.
Yeah.
We had a guest on the podcast a few years ago that at one point she was the manager of a cigar shop here in Columbus, Ohio. And a customer walked in. She asked him what he liked to smoke, and he was looking for recommendations. She listed off 5 cigars that she recommended to this person. And then all of a sudden, the other guy that was working there as part-time happened to be an older gentleman as well. The customer asked that gentleman, hey, what would you recommend? While he's literally standing right next to the lady who's a manager of the store. He asked the other guy, what would you recommend? And thankfully, that guy goes, well, what did she recommend?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the guy goes, well, she recommended this. And he goes, well, I'd listen to her. I don't even smoke.
There you go. Exactly.
So what happens in your situation beyond that when they point back at you? How does that interaction continue?
Oh, I just kill with kindness, and I really try to show them all that I know. I'll be like, you should try this cigar. It's very earthy, very cedary. You should try this cigar. It's darker. You won't want this cigar. It's too light for you. And I really just try to show them that I do know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Do you see them again? Does it are these repeat customers? Are they random? I don't know how it is where you're at.
Sometimes, yes. We're like right by the World Trade Center, so we do get a lot of just tourists. But yeah, sometimes they do come back. I've had one person I can think of in mind that was like that when he was looking for a cigar, and I was like, you should try this one. And he's like, you smoke cigars? A lot of women don't smoke cigars. I'm like, okay.
A lot of guys don't either.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I ended up introducing him to, it was actually the Opalencia, and he loved it. And he comes by and gets it a few times a week.
Good tie-in.
Cigar, I said I didn't care for.
I know, right? Everyone's different. It's okay.
All right. Yeah.
Shane?
So you said you kill them with kindness, but we're all human. So how do you handle like the frustration with that? Because that could get, I don't say overwhelming, but there's a part of like, well, what the fuck, man? Like,
it's tiring.
I know my
after
shit. I'm here doing a service. Like, just how do you handle the frustration sometimes?
Right. It's like I've worked really hard to be here, So it does get really frustrating. But I just, in that moment, when I kill them with kindness and I'm showing them everything that I do know, I get that confidence. I'm like, oh my gosh, I really do know a lot. Because, sometimes you forget.
There,
Well, I would like to think, and obviously it hasn't happened too much, I guess, the way you've been talking about it. I would like to think if a customer walks into the Davidoff Lounge in New York City, that they would be smart enough to realize that someone who's you're already shaking your
I know what you mean. They should be smart enough.
I know it doesn't.
One would like to think is how you should say that.
Yes. You would like to think that a person walking in there would be smart enough to know if this person is working at this store in one of the largest cities in America, that they know their shit.
Exactly.
But it doesn't happen all the time. But it should.
I'll counter that in this particular point that, Ash, you said that, like being a woman, that a lot of cigar lounges would like to hire a woman.
Yeah.
You said
that. Right. And, sometimes they do hire women that don't know anything just to have that presence. Just to have that presence.
What presence is that?
Just that female presence that they think guys need in a lounge. For some reason.
In general, guys do need that.
Bring your own woman.
I don't know why.
Yeah, you should, right?
Yeah.
What?
Shannon initially had the mic and put it down, so I didn't know if
you had another question.
You had a question or follow up?
Well, not a question, but on my RV travels here, when I make my way up to that area, I'll definitely stop in and burn one with you.
Please do. Yeah.
For sure.
Do you have RV parking in New York City?
I'll Uber in.
Yeah. Maybe park in New Jersey and take a train.
Now you're killing me. Come on.
Sorry.
Have you tried to park in New York?
I sold my car when I moved here. I was like, there's no way I'm even going to try.
Right. No reason, right? No, I think it's interesting though when you talk about that with like the cigar stuff, and again, like broadening it out there. I'm not going to try to get too wide there, but it's interesting to hear you guys all talk about that, is the qualifying things like that, because that goes on in a lot of conversations about anything. Is that again, like to your point, it's like, oh, about cigars, like, but what do you know about cigars? Like, do you smoke cigars? It's like when you give your opinion when you're sitting down over a cigar and you start talking about it, and not to get like necessarily into politics or religion or all that stuff, but it's just anything. I mean, people start. Again, I'm sure in New York City, it's even again, I'm assuming at this point, but it's more talk about money, jobs, careers, properties, all this stuff. And you chime in about that, and it's like they want to qualify you. Same thing with any of this stuff that's been going on the last couple of years. It's like you give an opinion, it's like, well, like you, of course you think that, but it's like, is there like how do you get that into more of a conversation versus just talking points? Well, people want to put out a resume. As Shannon said, he's not on the mic, but it's like, it's one of those things. Like same thing with cigars. This is a great, I think, parallel to that, is that whether you're female, you're young, whatever it is, like, yeah, you walk in, a guy smoking a cigar, and he's what you think of a cigar smoker. And I think of like, Davidoff. I think of, again, stereotypical, and you guys can judge me what you will, but it's a 40, 50-year-old, maybe, or whatever, white male, suited up, right? Looks like he could be making $12 an hour, but he's forced to dress as, he makes like 200, $250,000 a year, but he's having that conversation with you. That qualifies you as, to what his opinion is.
Exactly.
And I look at that as a great parallel to the fact that any of these conversations is like where we've been with all this stuff more recently, with all the issues at hand. It's how Ash, how do you think that people can get past that? How do you get past the fact that it's like, yes, first impressions mean something, right? But it's like, are you constantly qualifying people in a good way, in a negative way? Are you constantly just saying, well, if you think differently than I do, then we don't need to have a conversation?
Right.
Do you keep in that echo chamber that we've talked about in this podcast in part 2 before, is that the only people that you talk to and listen to are the people that actually think like you, that only like look like you? Like, how do you get out of that?
You have to try to be more socially and self-aware. Be aware of your surroundings and who is in the room, and be more open to talking to people.
But
you see a woman in a lounge, go talk to her. Ask her, how'd you get into smoking? Do you smoke often? I don't know.
All right, so let's talk about strength and community. How do you keep that equal, right? You know what I mean? Because that's the other side of this is, I'm not trying to I guess, focus on the fact that you're a female in the industry. But again, strength in community is a little bit of that equality, right? So again, you agree to disagree. Like you might, so at your lounge, it may be something similar. You have a lot of tourists that are of all different walks of life. Well, that's a great thing I love about the cigar community is that there are people making stupid money that don't talk about it. There's people that they're living paycheck to paycheck and they're still sitting down smoking cigars, and they sit next to each other and you have a conversation because you can actually be a real person, because that doesn't determine how you interact with other people. But on the female side of it is that when they come up to you and they start talking to you, is that, how do you keep that equal? Is it just a gauge as far as, are they actually talking to me? Are they talking to me because I'm a female in the industry? Are they hitting on me? Are they, what are we doing here? I love the fact that when you think about strength, if it's just surface level stuff, it's maybe bad. If it's just people being people, that's where it becomes good.
Yeah.
That's a fine line, or maybe it's not even that fine. It's just it's a blatant line that sometimes you actually can realize really quickly. And do you shut it down or you just walk away from it? Like, what do you do?
One time this guy said, he came up to me, he's like, I never really see women smoking cigars. And I said, wow, you should probably get out more often.
Love it.
So, it's really just about, I don't know, man, just keep talking to people. And that's kind of what I do. I just keep talking. I keep trying to not prove myself, but show how knowledgeable I am, because I do really love talking about cigars. I love it. It's something that I love. So that's what I'll do. And hopefully it'll help you realize that I do know what I'm talking about. And I know a lot of other women in the industry. And hopefully I can throw my podcast in as well, where I can say I interview mostly women in the industry. There's a lot of women that smoke. There's a lot of women that know what they're talking about. So really just keep talking.
So to some of the comments, I'm going to address some of these comments out here.
Yeah.
Someone asked, has anyone worked at the Tinderbox that's a woman? No, we haven't. It is a brother and sister that own the Tinderbox at Easton, the franchise, right? So there is it's a woman-owned business. But no, and then that same person, Ray, was the topic, women in the cigar industry. No, it's not that. It's, again, I think we're trying to get to that point, or at least I am, is that having this opportunity to have Ash on here is that, this is part of it. Again, I think this is a great parallel to what we are going through constantly, not just in the last few years, but always going through, is that you walk in, first impression is how some people operate, right? So it's something that if you feel like you're part of a community and then your boat is rocked because it's not the person you think you're going to be interacting with, and all of a sudden you put up the hurdles, you put up the blocks, you put up all these qualifiers because it's not what's comfortable to you. And I do think that's a great I guess metaphor to what a lot of this stuff is, Ray, out there, is that the fact that people qualify people based on appearance. And I think that is something, or based on, again, what, you can go into these other things, it's like, where do they live? Who do they vote for? Who's the banner, who's the yard sign in their yard in your same neighborhood. And all of a sudden you're qualifying your neighbors around you, and you had a great relationship with that person before that. And all of a sudden that goes out there like, well, we're not talking to those people anymore. We were just over there for a potluck last Saturday. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, no, and they did this. So clearly they're bad people. It's like, but you guys were hugging. Like, you guys were, you were broing out. Like, you know what I mean? Like they were supposed to come over on Friday. Like, they're not anymore. That's the whole point, is that I think this is a great metaphor to something like this, is women in the cigar industry is something along those lines that you can go into, like, oh, I've heard great things about Davidoff Lounge in New York City. Like, Nate, we're going out there. We got to hit up Shannon. You're hitting it up with your RV, parking in New Jersey, I heard. But then you have to, like, we're all going to get down to to the Davidoff Lounge. Like, it should be all suited up. We're gonna wear our Sunday's finest.
Nah, you wear whatever you
And then
want.
Ash walks up. Can I speak to the man of the house? like old school. Like,
I am the man of the house.
The same shit,
Right.
That is the same shit. Like, I got to be honest. That is it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know, Ray. If that answers your questions,
Shannon.
So we're talking about community. So at the 10 event, the Friday night when we're all hanging out up at Tinderbox.
rough night.
But
Rough
you had
night.
all the big hitters, in the industry there. And I'm there with my wife. We're all hanging out, and Eric Espinosa's talking to us. Like we're talking to Eric for like 20, 30 minutes. He's just sharing stories.
Have you met Eric, Ash?
I don't know.
You would know.
You would know.
I would know?
You'll
Okay.
definitely know.
Yeah, you know.
But we're swapping stories. We're having a great time. We're laughing. We're in tears telling stories, back and forth. We're smoking. And he walks away, and my wife was like, "Oh, he seems pretty cool. Is that one of your friends?" I started laughing. I was like,
I smoke a shit.
and I was actually smoking one of his cigars, and I held my cigar up. I was like, "See this brand?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "That's the man that owns the company." She was like, "What?"
Yeah.
I was like, "He's so nice. He's so cool. He was just talking to us like we were just friends." I was like, "That's how it is."
It's community.
He was community.
Yes.
He didn't give a shit. I'm just some guy that buys his shit.
Yeah.
He was my friend in that moment.
I think that's something, while it's not only the cigar community, I do think it's something that is unique about the cigar community.
Yeah.
That you can be in a shop with those big name individuals. And most of them, because in the industry, there are definitely some egos in the industry, but most of them, like when they're hanging out in a shop, like they're just talking like they're one of the regulars.
Yeah.
They will talk to anybody. They will hang out with anybody. They will answer questions from anybody.
Yeah.
That's there, because whoever it is that walks in the door, male, female, otherwise, there's a bond there, and that bond is cigars.
Right.
And so it's an opportunity to build that friendship, build that relationship, and the greater community around cigars.
Oh, absolutely. And then you guys shut down Tinderbox. We moved next door to Fido's, and it was everybody just sitting there just having the greatest time, and nobody gave a shit who sold what. It was just hanging out, having drinks, talking life.
Yeah.
And that's the
Love it.
community, man. That's why I love it so much.
Someone threw up a comment. I put it up on there. Sean, everyone was friends that night. It's interesting. Someone else said something about someone else in the industry just now, that this person is a dick, right? In the industry. That individual, I will say that certain interactions I've had with him in the past, when I was at Cigar Fest and he was at a booth, he owns the company, and I kind of thought the same thing. Then I went out with Eric Espinosa, actually. Same person was in town, and we all met up and all that stuff, and it was just all friends. Then I went to one of his lounges, and he came up, gave me a big hug. Then he came into the shop, and it's like, yeah, I got to be a part of this 10 event. Unfortunately, 2020's 10 event was shut down because of COVID 5 days before this person was coming.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you, I would put money on it, that if he was at that Friday night, he would have been with you having drinks, and he'd be having cigars with you, and he'd probably given you a cigar, bought you a drink. It's just, it's that community side of it. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes not everyone's always on.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes everyone has something else going on. It's just, but it's that
People are allowed to have an off day.
People are allowed to have an off day.
Yeah.
Who hasn't, right?
Exactly.
I've had one or two. Sean, don't look at me like
This
that.
week, or
Nope, not this week.
you had to think about it, didn't you?
It's only Wednesday. It's been a good week so far. Good couple days. No, but strengthening community. I mean, like, to keep this topic going for a little while longer is what is the value of giving people a chance to, if you have this common interest, to sit down. Going back to the original kind of conversation there with Ash, is that, you know, you have these people in your lounge, you have this, you know, not to get into the women in the cigar industry, get past all the gender stuff, get past all the politics, but when you will take the moment to sit down and do something. The person that asked me on Sunday night, much respect to her, of like, what have you done? And my response was literally, Nate, you were there, and I said, well, I invited a bunch of people over to my house on a Sunday, and we had a bunch of different groups at my house.
Yeah.
I do a podcast every Wednesday night with all sorts of people, and I make myself available to anyone on social media.
Yeah.
And again, at my house, it was not just cigar people. It was not just, you know, my friends. It was not just, it was neighbors. It was everything. It's like, and I looked at that person. I said, you know, that's what I do. And she looked back at me and she's like, okay, that's a good answer. How many people can fucking say that?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you know, I'd say a lot of people, you know, especially in this country, are just, you know, those keyboard warriors on fucking Twitter and everything else. I thought it's so ironically special that when the news hit that Elon Musk bought Twitter, that all the people on Twitter, a lot of people on Twitter, and I saw a lot of it, and I followed, because during 2020, I followed people on both sides. I talked about this, you know, during the right and left and all that stuff. But it's to see all these people like just absolutely bitching about the person that bought Twitter on Twitter. I'm like, I don't know if you understand what you're doing right now. I feel like the irony is lost on you. But it's like even the people that you held so tried and true to, they were like, yeah, we have a price too. It's like, I don't understand. Like, how do you not get it? You know what I mean? It's like that people, they do these things that take up their hours of their day on all the social media, on all this stuff, on all the things that, in my opinion, spawn a lot of hatred either way, all the ways, not just one or two. But when you ask them, what if, like that question I was asked, like, well, what do you do about it?
Throw it back at them. What have you done?
No, I say I've had people at my house at least once a week in my garage.
Yeah.
I had people on my patio. I invited my neighbors. I don't care what your political affiliation is. Like, you're invited. Like, I want to have you over, because this is something that I think is lost, is the community. The strength in the community is something that is so powerful that I think that we have lost. Like, the community used to be a neighborhood. It used to be the country. It used to be the world. Like, as we've gone further out, now it's like, well, fuck my neighborhood, fuck the community. Now I'm all about just like what I feel like is a good cause that I need to really be behind, or what the fact that this bottle right here, that they had to make a statement that about Rittenhouse, like, Jesus Christ, let it lie. Don't say anything. Hey, sales are up. Cheers to everyone. Doing a Rittenhouse, because you can't even do that, because people are gonna be like, oh, well, yeah, obviously I'm gonna boycott Heaven Hill because they're behind the Kyle Rittenhouse ruling. It's like, this is what you think when you wake up?
Well, I think,
how's your home life? Why is the divorce rate so high?
Oof. Okay, easy.
No, I'm just saying, like, this is it. I mean, yeah, I'm just saying, but this is a big part of it. It's like, why can't you fucking like take care of your home life and your people in your life, but you're upset about something that a distillery you've never been to is tweeting about Rittenhouse because of this issue that you're seeing on the news, that you were not in Kenosha. You know what I mean? Like, all that stuff is so much more important than the community that you're part of.
So when I was at that tasting social last night, you know, there were a couple of people that, you know, I started talking to, and I told them about the podcast, and I was like, yeah, we do it live on Wednesday nights on Facebook and YouTube. And they're like, wait, you do it live? I'm like, yeah, the biggest reason why we enjoy doing it live is having the interaction with the community, having 100%. People that can sit here, watch the podcast as we record it, and they can interact. and it's not just that they're interacting with us and asking us questions and we throw their comments up on the screen. They're also interacting with each other.
Yeah.
Because not every day of the week do these people necessarily converse with one another and talk about issues. But on Wednesday night, when we do the podcast, sure enough, they're there. And the person that they may have had an argument with last week about the topic, they're once again talking about that topic with that same person again. And maybe it's a topic that now they have common viewpoints on, or
if they don't,
or even if they don't, they're still having a conversation. They're still having a dialogue. And
you watch the comments between like Sean Anderson and Ray Cheshire.
Yeah.
You would think that they hate each other at certain weeks.
Yes. But then when they met each other the day before the 10 event.
And why did they meet each other?
Through this community.
It's amazing.
Exactly. And I mean, so that's one. So I was trying to explain to some of those people last night, like that's one of the reasons why we do this live. Yes, it may not be as polished and have all the, videography and, the filters on the pictures and all that stuff.
Nice.
But it brings that community aspect that someone who records a podcast on, in their garage, their basement, their living room, bathroom. But then they spend, a week or two polishing and editing it. No one else is in, actually being involved in the conversation until after it's posted. But then it's just people in the comments afterwards.
That's what Twitter's all about. That's what Twitter's all about. Are you fucking kidding me? The biggest thing about Twitter is the biggest save on this is we want an edit button. It's like, fuck you. Don't get drunk and get on Twitter. Don't get emotional and get on Twitter. Delete the app or put your phone down.
But no, I
we have a question for Ash here.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you saw this or not, but this is again from Jonathan Herring, who's with Forged, which is I don't know if you're familiar with Forged. Are you familiar with Forged?
I don't think so.
So General Cigars, right?
Yes.
So they recently did a split within themselves, if you will, to have more focus on. They have such a broad portfolio, right?
Totally.
So Forged took a couple of the bigger names and also a lot of the, I guess, older names that weren't getting as much attention, because when a general rep comes into a cigar shop or an account or whatever, they can't focus on 20 some different brands, let alone 200 SKUs. So they made in my opinion, they made a wise decision. So Jonathan was with General in our area. Now he's down in Texas, but he says, Ash, what's next? Full time with the podcast, brand rep, starting a cigar company, ambassador for a company.
Man,
that's what he asked. So I'll leave it up on the screen and let you answer that.
I have so many ideas. I would love to go full time with the podcast and travel, meet everyone everywhere. I'd also love to be a brand rep. I'd love to start a cigar company, like a big resort almost. That's my dream. Is to have an inn and a bar and a sports bar and a lounge and just have everything. That would be so cool.
You're in the wrong state for that.
Oh, well, yeah, it wouldn't be here. Yeah, I don't know. I have so many ideas and I don't even know which one to go with first. I think brand rep would be a good place to go to first.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Why is that? Why do you think that's a good, why not the podcast or anything else?
I think brand rep, I could get my name out there more and I could learn a lot more about selling and a lot more about different shops and how they operate and what they do and just everything. I think I could just learn a lot more from that position.
You might be able to see a lot of sides of cigar smoking. You know what I mean? Like the enthusiast.
Exactly.
You can see different brick and mortars. You can see different regions. You can see what sells, what people enjoy.
Well, I know that's something that I experienced when I was a cigar rep. So I had 7.5 states in my territory. I had 200 accounts, and I would learn and I would see how these different shops did business and what worked well for them versus other areas. But then at the same time, when I would then go to another area and they would ask, and that shop owner or GM was asking me questions, because I had seen so many other accounts and what was working other places, I could then relay that information to them. It's like, well, hey, you're talking about this. I was just in, Indiana, and there was an account that had a similar issue, and here's how they dealt with it, or here's how this shop deals with, one shop asked me about, they wanted to have lockers. I was like, well, here's some accounts that actually do have lockers and have memberships, and here's how they run it versus how other shops run it. And you just got to figure out what you think works best for your clientele. But I'm going to tell you from experience, this shop does well because they're located here and they have this much of a population to appeal to. That may not be the same thing for you. So for for Tinderbox at Easton, for example, it may not work out to have a locker program where you charge $250 a month.
That'd be great
to be a locker member. There's
right.
You're not, being a cigar shop in Columbus, Ohio, you may not have the demand that could be able to do something like that. So you just got to figure out what works best for you, because each shop is an individual person.
Every state's different with that stuff too. Is that, like a big part about having a locker is it makes sense in Ohio, but it makes more sense sometimes in other states that have the bars there. Yeah. Where you're a locker member. You pay more, but at the same time, you're like, I'm a locker member. If I come in and everything's full and I can't get a seat to sit down and smoke cigars that I bought, I just spent like thousands of dollars. And I drink whatever. I have a bottle of my locker I bought from you. And I come in on a Friday night and I can't have a seat. I want to cancel my membership. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things that it's always a different ballpark.
Yeah.
Sorry, my computer's dying. I'm going to plug it up real quick. You guys keep going.
All right. I love the community interaction here. Jonathan says repping in the Northeast, right, is brutal, right? New England, I assume. My only advice would be to start in the Mid-Atlantic or Midwest. So he's got a little bit. Sean said something that I don't think that Ashley would understand, but name recognition is important. This is a guy that's not in the state, right? He's been a part about the podcast community. Marianne Eves could not do what she's doing if she didn't have the name and history behind it.
Yeah.
You have to know. Yeah. That was something that we talked about with the bourbon side of it. And have you had a little bit, Shannon, of the Marianne Eves black bottle from Watershed?
I have not.
Come over to my house. Do you still have some? Okay. I didn't know if you finished that bottle or not.
Go over to Nate's house.
All right.
I only have the one bottle.
How many do you think I have?
You have the same bottle.
I do.
I got the Marianne Eves pick down the basement.
I also have the Marianne Eves single barrel.
Yeah, down the base. I have mine in the basement.
Oh, okay. You got both as well?
Under lock and key.
Mine's not under lock.
You literally have access to my house. I don't know what that means. And Tony's in his crate, so he can't bite you at your ankles. So you might, though. You might sick him.
Well, we were talking about community, so I've been going back and forth with Jacob Sanders from Rocky Patel.
So Jake, Ash, Jake was the original. Like it was Jake Sanders and myself doing this podcast, and then he took the job at Rocky Patel in Indy. Go ahead. And
so I've been messing with him right now that I have some clients that are Columbus firefighters. And there's a big convention going on in Indy this week.
Yes, there is.
And I said, hey, you guys smoke cigars. I'll see what I can get done for you there. So he said, hey, pass my number on to your guys. Tell them to text me. I'll see what I can do because we're super busy. So that's the community, like just reaching out, saying, hey, we got buddies in the area. What can you do? They're going to be there all weekend just tearing it up, and they all love cigars. So hopefully we get that worked out. But that's just the community of that.
Exactly.
Reach out to
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, so that is fun, right? You know, with Jake and Indy and just around town, and so I've had some people like, remember Dustin Bovey. He's been on the podcast countless times in the past, and yeah, the best man in his wedding. But you know, when he went to Chicago and all this stuff, he and his girl before they were married, and it was something that again strengthened the community. Is like they're going there the first time, and he's like, yeah, where should I go smoke? And I'm like, oh, hang on a second, like let me reach out. So at the time, Nat Sherman was still a thing.
Yeah.
And so Kylie was the rep, and she's from Chicago, and I was like, hey, they were looking at like, you know, where should they go? And she's like, well, do they know Big's Mansion? I was like, well, I know Big's Mansion. It's this big thing in Chicago, you know, it's beautiful, you know, old school shop. Well, she's like, just have them go there. I'll put them on the list. And I think Big's Mansion is one of those type of things, probably like Davidoff in New York City. It's like, if you know someone, you can get in there and smoke. But if you don't, you're gonna like, all right, it's gonna be like $75 to smoke in here. And like,
yeah,
I'll just take a couple to go. You know, I mean, that'll be $150 for those 2 cigars. I should have smoked here. Like, goddamn. You know, but it's like, you know, again, it's like, people, you know, I think networking is a big thing. Like, you know, it absolutely always is. You know, people that you know, as long as you communicate what you're doing with your friends and your network is, hey, do you know, I know, Shannon, you smoke cigars. Like, do you know anyone? And you're like, well, no, I don't know anyone there, but hang on, give me a day. You reach out to me, I reach out to reps, I reach out, you know, hey, just tell them you know this person and you're already on the list. And they're gonna be like, what are you talking about? It's not about clout. It's literally just about helping other people. It's just we have this common bond and we all want to enjoy this. It's so much fun. Like now, I'm sorry, Ash, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Sorry.
If I have someone going to New York City and they're like, hey, you know somewhere to smoke a cigar? I'm like, I actually do.
Yes.
Don't Davidoff Lounge. Well, I can't afford that.
Yes.
I don't care.
All you have to do is buy one cigar and then
Yeah.
you're good to smoke in the lounge. There's no minimum or anything.
It feels so much better if they're like, is Ashley working tonight?
Yes.
She's not. But oh, your name's Rick? I got you. I got
Come by.
Got a seat right here for you. I was in Nashville and we were you know, Miguel. So Nashville's big with CAO and now Crowned Heads. Yeah. And it was so funny. It was the opposite, right? So I went into the Casa de Monte Cristo, which was recommended me by Miguel.
I also recommended it to you.
You did too.
I was there a few months before you.
And so we went in there and it wasn't packed. It was just like, you know, whatever. It was like a couple of free tables, whatever. I walked in the humidor and I don't name drop. I don't do any of that stuff. And it was one of those things. I walked in the humidor and I'm looking around. I'm like, all right, there's a guy in like behind the counter in the humidor. I picked out a cigar and I walked up and I was like, hey, this is really cool. Yeah. Miguel from Crowned Heads, actually, he did a podcast from that lounge in Nashville one time with us remotely.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, Miguel. He's like, oh, do you know Miguel? I think so. How much is it? You know, like I don't like. Well, you never really want to count on it, but it's like these are the reasons you go into those places.
Yeah. Right. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I went there.
Yeah.
And then I started talking to those guys, and I had the same thing. Like, oh, how do you know Miguel? Well, he was the first rep I ever met, and then a few years later, he was a groomsman in my wedding.
I don't have that card. I don't have that card.
Well, I had that.
I'm gonna go to the Davidoff Lounge in New York City and be like, do you? I know Ashley. Do you? She's right over there. I look at, hey.
Hey.
She'd recognize you by the voice.
Yes. There you go.
Like I had that card. I had that card, and I still couldn't even get into Crowned Heads. So, which is headquartered right there in Nashville. You know, I mean, so you know, it didn't help me that far.
But to your point, it is strengthening community. It's just helping other people. That's the biggest part of it. It's getting past the barriers, all the stuff, all the comments that were coming through on this stuff, and I absolutely love this stuff. Is that there is a bit of a simpler time or a simpler mentality, is that you really can move past some of the differences.
Yeah.
Just for the common interest.
Do you think it's easier in the cigar or whiskey community than it is like just personal life and day-to-day stuff?
I think that we make it easier.
How so?
I think we make it easier because we have that common ground. There's so many common interests that people have, but these trigger points of what is the dynamic of what is so polarized gets in the way of it. So it's like, if going back to what we talked about in part 2 here, is that if you don't agree with me on this, like it's not that. I could say that, my neighbor, like what I said earlier in a bit jest in my cul-de-sac here, my neighborhood here, is that if I say, I know Derek, and they're like, oh, cool. Like they sit me down and they text Derek, and it's like Derek's, and I'm not saying I love Derek. He's a great guy. I'm not saying that, but it's like, if we had a disagreement on politics or whatever else, he's like, yeah, treat him nice, but not too nice. Because he has a this yard sign in his yard. You know what I mean? Like there is a bit of that. It's not as pure. It's not like we prioritize not only our viewpoints, but also the people that follow those viewpoints. And I think that's the big miss there, is that I think that in the cigar community, and I don't know, Ashley, if you agree with this, is that sometimes the great equalizer is the cigars. If you're into anything, if you're passionate about any hobby or interest, something that you dedicate your time to, and you meet someone through that industry that is a common interest, that still does in certain industries takes priority over everything else, because you don't dive into it. You don't care, like, oh, who'd you vote for? What do you look like? All this, like, it doesn't matter. Certain times, I think a lot of people in the last 10 years, they do prioritize differently. That whole scenario I was joking about earlier, it's like, oh yeah, no, we were over at their house and you were hugging them and you invited them over to our house on Thursday. Yeah, they're not invited on Thursday. And they show up on Thursday and you're like, what do you do with that? Like there are some, it's the priority of how you rank people as what you value as them as people. I think that sometimes if someone is a neo-Nazi that you just found out about and you just invite them over to the house, like, okay, I get it. Something happened, right? Something happened. Not into it, right? Like, I need to have a conversation with them. They're not welcome to our potluck on Thursday. But other than that, it's just, they're people.
I think one of the things that is unique when you start from the hobby side, so whether it be hanging out in a cigar shop, hanging out at like a distillery, restaurant, or bar, or like for me, being a member at a gun range and doing some of the social events there, I think what makes those places different than like your day-to-day community that's around you is when you go into a cigar shop and you're sitting in a lounge smoking a cigar, there's other people there doing that as well, and it almost forces an interaction. You don't necessarily have to talk to other people, but when you're sitting in a lounge and then all of a sudden someone else comes up and they sit next to you or they sit across from you, it's awkward if you just sit there in silence. There's almost this need to engage in conversation with that person. And so I think those communities make it easier to talk about things and become a community, because they're obviously, you're there because you have a common interest. Now you can, because of that common interest, you can talk about other things. I think when we're talking about like community based on where we live, it's a little bit more difficult because you're not necessarily forced to walk across the street and talk to your neighbor, or walk to the house next door.
You fucking should be.
You should. I agree. You should. And we've talked about that in the past. Yeah. But because that person lives across the street, you don't have to leave your house. But if you want to have a conversation with them, you do. But there's extra steps involved in initiating that conversation. When you're hanging out at a cigar shop, someone else has walked in, bought a cigar, and they're sitting down next to you smoking. They've both of you have already taken the step to meet at some common ground.
Yeah.
The ice is already broken.
So
it makes it easier to have a conversation because of those hobbies than it is to actually have a conversation in your neighborhood.
That was the positive about this. So Ashley, I know you haven't listened to this podcast that we had working at Davidoff. I know also you guys follow each other is Michael Herklotz, right?
Yeah. He's been on my podcast.
He was, yeah. So we had him on. It was in the midst of the shutdown. This is when we it was a great podcast, right? And he introduced this whole topic of the front porch friends. The fact that when things before COVID and even also getting back towards now after COVID is that if you have a home, right, or you're in an apartment or whatever, you sit on your balcony, but you keep to yourself. Like if you have a house, you sit on the back porch, right, and you keep to yourself. During that time, he was saying that he's like, we started sitting on a front porch just to see other people sitting on the front porch and seeing the delivery drivers come through. It's like,
yeah,
hey, how are you?
Just want to see people.
Good to see you. It was something that it was so fun to talk to him about that, because he was saying that it's this was a new dynamic that people realized that when they were holed into their house, that they were searching for that community. Yeah.
So
the community that was lost, you know what I mean? In their own neighborhood, because all the internet and social media stuff that took people away, the jobs just going, they left in the morning, came home at night, and that was it. You might wave to someone taking out their trash, but it's like, hey, how you doing? But there was a time where there was a desperation almost for the interaction. And he's like, we started sitting on our front porch.
Yeah,
just to see people that were also hopefully sitting on their front porch. And we talked to them way beyond the 6 foot distance thing. It was 60 yards. Hey, how you doing?
Just
Kids
yelling at them.
It's just one of those things. And it was this interaction that people were missing way before that, but they didn't realize it. I love that.
Right. Yeah, that's why I started the podcast. I miss talking to people.
Right. That's what you said. You're like, I don't know. I just might as well reach out to them.
Yeah, right.
If people wanted to talk.
And I'm not usually a talker, but man, COVID got me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You moved to New York from a small town and you're not a talker.
I know. It's so weird. And that's another reason why I wanted to start the podcast. I wanted to be better at it. I want to talk to people.
You want to?
Well,
I'm not gonna say I'm gonna try, but I'm gonna try to try. I'll give you that.
I tried to try.
Take it from people that have been doing this for over 4 years. It becomes easier and more natural as you do it more.
Exactly.
There's some weeks I don't want to. I gotta be honest.
Yes, we all have those weeks where we're like, "Gosh, I really don't want to do it," but we still do it because it's part of what we do. Our listeners expect that weekly interaction and that topic and the conversation.
I didn't do a Tasty Tuesday. I had a handful of people.
I know. I saw that.
Where's Tasty Tuesday? I'm like, Jesus Christ, man.
Well, you had the same thing after COVID first hit in 2020. You started doing those, or actually, no, it was late in 2020 and early 2021. You were
the weekly specials.
No, you were doing the walks.
Oh, yeah.
You were doing one of the things that you did was you were doing the morning walks and you were posting pictures about your walk. And then there were days where you may have gone on your walk, you just didn't post pictures of it, and you had people reaching out to you going, "Hey, what happened to the morning walk? Are you still doing that? Something happened to you?" You're like, "No, I did it. Like I just wasn't
sprain an ankle.
No, I just wasn't putting it out there that I did it. Like, no, I still do this. I'm still doing it. I just, for whatever reason, I just didn't post pictures about it, but people were concerned, like, everything all right? Like you miss one day and they're like, are you okay?
It's fun to use social media. And I'll say this to you, Ash, is, and I'm interested to see where you go with this podcast and your career. But I mean, it's been a pleasure meeting you. But I mean, like you say, you have all these, like, you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah, right.
You got to zero in, and you probably are. I'm not going to put this on you, but I would be, a lot of people would be, is like, I don't want to put the eggs in one basket this way, and then I miss out on something else. And that is a big obstacle for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But as we get into this is the part of part two that we go into our closing remarks, and I want to hear from you. Is like, what are you learning right now? What have you learned, and where do you want to go from there with the mindset of strength in the community? Because I think that a lot of people that might be listening at some point, whether it's right now or they go back and listen to it, they stumble across this podcast and they're like, what the fuck are these people talking about? But they stay for it. And you get to the closing remarks, and it's, you have this person out there living in New York for 3 years. You move from what you consider a small town. You've been working in an industry before that. Then you move there for this, but you want to be a part of this, and now you're a part of that, and you're doing your own thing. And someone asked, like they did on the on the feed, is what's next?
Yeah.
This or that. And you're like, you don't know me, bro. What are you doing? Stressing me out. I don't know. I wasn't there yet. Now you're putting this in front of me. Do I have to pick, or like, what do I do? But like for you, it's like you seem to be enjoying yourself. You seem to be comfortable in New York City, which is not common.
Yeah.
And you joined a podcast tonight, and you reached out to us, and I appreciate that, to be a part of this podcast. If you ever want us to be a part of your podcast,
I would love that. Love it.
That's on you.
Let's do it.
Again, no one's listening, so no one knows. But you can back out anytime. But I'm saying, it's like, what is next? What have you learned? What is the strength in community with you?
The most important thing for my podcast is diversity. I have always, since I was young, been so curious about every culture, every religion, every tradition, everything. That's what I want to learn about, and not only learn about, but bring awareness to everyone else of how different we are, but we still have so many things in common.
Love it.
So that's what I want to do. I want to meet everyone everywhere, get their stories, not only for myself, but for everyone to hear. That's really my main goal.
Do you think that's relatable to a lot of things that have been going on for the last 5-6 years?
Totally, yeah.
It's big.
It's huge. It's so important.
The divide that happened.
My God. Epic.
The commonalities have been lost.
Totally. I know it.
Do you think it's because,
bring it back around?
Why do you think that is?
I think everyone's just scared. There's just so much has happened in the past couple years. It's fear. Fear can bring out a part of you that you didn't know existed. So I think it's important to get these stories from all over the world to connect everybody again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Shannon, you want to do closing remarks? Shannon stuck around in the garage. Tony is barking his balls off inside. Tony's my dog.
Oh.
I know.
I don't know. Just what she was saying, like just bring it back around. Over the last few years and through the last presidency up until now, somehow we've been taught to hate each other, and it's sad because everything on media, mainstream, social, there's been this divide that's either this or that, and that's not who we are as people. When you
Right.
sit down in the cigar lounge or anywhere you actually get to sit down with people, you find that's not the real part. We're still human. We still love connection. We still love our fellow man, and I think it's up to us to bring that back. I mean, like tonight, we're sitting here having this beautiful conversation, taking chances, stepping out, leaving your small town, going to a big city, and you're thriving. You've got a podcast, and you're doing big things with that. And I really appreciate that.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, we just need to keep moving forward and just put all the bullshit aside, all the shit that they want you to say, because that's not us.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, Sunday here at Steve's, we had a beautiful little cookout. Everybody's
Nice.
conversating, loving life. We all have different opinions about things, but who gives a shit? Those are opinions. Just love your
Right.
fellow man, right? Or
That's right.
woman. So,
Whoa, man.
whoa, man. So that's like that's my next chapter in my life is to when we stretch out, hit the road in his RV. I want to build some social media around me cutting hair, sipping on bourbon, whiskey, cigars, and just talking life.
Love it.
I don't give a shit where you came from. I don't care who you voted for. That's nothing to me. Who are you? What makes you tick?
You cut your hair.
Let me cut your hair. How did we get to this moment where we met? All that matters.
Absolutely.
And we all have experiences, good, bad, ugly, but they're all experiences, and we can all learn from each other.
Love it. Nate?
Definitely.
So I think a lot of our conversation about community has been focused on the cigar aspect of it, some of the whiskey as well. So, and this is a question kind of to take away. It doesn't have to be answered by everyone. But since we focus so much on the cigar community, how do we transition that sense of community from the cigar shop to the rest of our lives? Because I think a lot of people, when they look at it, if there's someone that hangs out in cigar shops regularly, they realize there's a lot of people in that cigar shop that they talk to, and not everyone there do they agree with, but they still have that common bond of cigars or whiskey or both. So how do we transition that into the rest of our lives? How do we build our community where we live? And I think what we have to do is take that same mindset that in our community, there are people around us that we do have similar interests with. There are things that we do agree with. We may not all have the same sign in our yard. We may not go to the same church or any church. We may not vote for the same people, but we're still human beings. We're still trying to achieve certain things. Like we're still trying to be better people and be successful and accomplish certain things or have certain things. So I think too much over the last, I don't know, call it decade, maybe less than a decade, but it's been several years where I think we get this idea that in order for us to be friends with other people and agree, like we have to agree on everything. And if we're talking to someone, like if I'm hanging out with Shannon and Shannon and I are talking like, oh, cool. Shannon and I like cigars. We like whiskey. There's 20 things that Shannon and I all like and agree on. But then all of a sudden there's just one thing that we disagree on. Like, oh, nope, can't hang out with that person. I think that's the wrong mentality to have.
Yeah.
I mentioned, Miguel was a groomsman in my wedding. there are a lot of issues that Miguel and I disagree on. We have different views of, from a country as where we think we need to go or what we need to do, but we have that common bond of cigars. And that's really what started our friendship. And even though we disagree on a lot of other stuff, we are still friends because of that bond that we have around the cigars. And we still talk to each other. And Miguel, when he was on the podcast, he actually talked about there were times in recent years where he was much more vocal about certain political issues, and he had said some things on social media to other people that were a little harsh, a little crass. And it wasn't until years later that he actually went back and apologized to those people. He's like, I'm sorry I said this. You and I consider us friends because of this and this, and there's all these other things we agree on, and I let my emotions get the best of me on this one particular issue. And so I think that's what we need to do in order for us to take that sense of community into the rest of our lives, is find out what we have in common and then just build off of that. Several years ago, the actor Rob Schneider was asked about division in the U.S., and he goes, I think if you ask most people, they get along with their neighbors. Like the people you live next to, you get along with them, and that person gets along with the other people. Like, I think there's a better sense of community than we may realize. We don't have to agree on everything. We just agree on enough for us to actually build off of that and, have a better relationship with those around us.
Yeah.
Sorry I missed some of those comments because I had to go inside for him.
Will said, hello. Hi.
Tony.
Hi.
And who else doesn't know Tony?
I got a little head tilt.
He's a good boy. The topic of strengthening community is something that I think is lost on a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very impactful when people realize that they have to start with their own home. They have to start with their self and the people that are important around them. Because I think they make better decisions. I'm of the opinion that they make better decisions once they have their home in order. It's not always easy.
Right.
You want to say something, Tony?
Tell us, Tony.
I think that things that are important to people around you are important for a reason. And when you put your community first, when you put your inner circle first, a lot of people most people will have a better mind or better sense of self when they're making decisions on how they interact with other people. And that is, unfortunately, I think it is less common than most people that don't have their inner circle or their household in order type of a thing. With you moving out to New York City, Ash, you made that decision, and it gave you a sense of confidence, is what I've learned from you tonight.
Definitely.
You have different viewpoints, or you have a different mindset. It's all based on the core, right? You brought your hometown with you,
right?
But it filled in some gaps because you put yourself first, and I think that a lot of people don't do that. And that's where the confusion, and that's where the shutting people off that don't think like you comes from.
Right. It's so true.
It's a bit of resentment. It's not anger. It's not anything else. It's truly just a little bit of this resentment that is just lingering, that it's a bit of a chip on your shoulder that when you look at the strengthening community, And I don't know about you, Ashley, back in your hometown, but there is, and Ray said something, when you go back to your hometown, there is a sense of home because it never really progresses to something new. But that's not what it's about. I mean, that's your core. It's for me, I was raised in a suburban household that religion was a big thing. I was raised Lutheran. I'm not a churchgoer anymore, but all that stuff that was put into my head, I said in a bad way, all the stuff I was raised on brought me to the point that I am today. All those core values were important to me, and it has impacted people in ways I've never really, unless I actually give myself the time to reflect on that, you don't understand why people like to be around you. You don't understand why people don't like to be around you. Yeah. So I think that, the strength in the community is that you have this common ground, like you have this common interest, you have the common hobby, you have the common lifestyle. When you embrace that and you bring in yourself to that equation and you embrace the fact that you are super important to your everyday life, you and everyone else around you benefit from that. Because I got to be honest with everyone out there that's still listening at this point, or you tune in later, is the value that you bring as a person. If you get the value, it's only worth what you give yourself in value.
Mm-hmm.
If you short yourself, it's going to come across that way. You will not impact people. If you value yourself with the lessons that you've learned, whether it be through your family, whether it be through your upbringing, whether it be through relationships that have succeeded or failed, whether it be through your career that has succeeded or failed, is that the more you embrace what you have learned as an individual, the authenticity of that will make a bigger impact on people that will also strengthen your core. And it's so amazing to me that doing this podcast every week is that you talk about the strength in community. We talked about the cigars. We talked about the whiskey side of it. We talked about doing the podcast side of it. The only reason that, Ashley, that we all met tonight is because you do a podcast based on cigars. And I don't know what you're going to take from this, but I know what I'm going to take from this is that the impactful side of it is that I am, and Shannon was saying is that, like he joked in a sense, but also a little bit serious because he's doing these big things. It's like you impacted him. You're a role model.
Thanks.
Did you say role model? Yeah, you're a role model. I mean, these are the things that you never know how you impact other people, but if you're doing it in an authentic way for the betterment of yourself, that's the strength in community. Is if you're genuine, if you have shortcomings, you're not who you want to be someday, or as soon as you realize that, like, this is me, all of those realizations really have an impact not only on your life, which is most important. I will say that, like, you start with yourself, but when you actually start having impact on other people, you got to be ready. Because when you focus on yourself and doing these things, and someone else says, "Man, you really impacted me," and you're like, "Well, I don't know, I just do what I." It's like, "No, fuck you!" Like, you did it. You did you. Own it. I love it. Yeah, you own it, and you hope that other people do it the same way you did, in a sense that they own it. They're not going to walk the same path, but they're gonna own the fact that they know who they are better than they did before this. That's the strength in community, and it can happen with a common cigar, or you have a pour of a whiskey. You invite them over to your house. You give themselves an absolute, just honest conversation, and you don't agree with them walking into it. You don't agree with them when you walk out of it, but you listened, and you hope they listened. I think there's a very, very impactful and important lesson be learned from the fact that you open yourself up to another experience with someone else that's not you, and you genuinely want to learn from that experience. Not that you're going to agree with them on everything, but you learn from it. You were open. And I think that's something that is lost a lot of the times. And I think it's something that, the cigar community, the bourbon community, doing the podcast thing, is that we all have this same common bond in the fact that we do this not to make money. It'd be great if we all made millions of dollars, but it would be something that at the very least, at the end of the broadcast, if you made an impact on one person and you learn something in the meantime,
Worth
man,
it.
I can't think of anything better than that.
Exactly.
I really can't. With that being said, I'm sorry, Nate, that I had to let the dog out. I'm going to listen back to your closing remarks. Ashley, do you have anything else to add?
Have any what?
Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think you said anything else bad. I was like, I don't have anything bad.
Do you have anything else bad or to add?
I don't. Nothing bad. I think the only thing to add is to just, like you said, just keep talking, keep asking questions. You will find a common ground with someone, even if you don't think that you will. You don't have to be best friends with them or even ever see them again, but just keep talking, keep asking questions.
Absolutely. Keep the conversation going.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. Ashley, thank you. Guys, check out Ashes with Ash on all the podcast listening apps, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, I assume.
Everything.
All that stuff. Luminary. And are you on Facebook, by the way?
So I was kicked out of Facebook. I'm not sure why, but I just actually opened up a new one today.
All right.
So I'm on Facebook again.
We encourage you to join the Bourbon and BS community page on
Will
Facebook.
do.
Yeah. But no, I appreciate it. Tinderbox at Easton in Columbus, Ohio. Thank you for the sponsorship and the great cigar, the My Father Bijou, which we all enjoyed in part 1. Part 2, we were smoking the Upman Nicaragua by AJ Fernandez. What were you smoking?
I was smoking the Buenaventura by Curavari, the Praline. Yeah. So good. Right.
And also, if you're in New York City, check out the Davidoff Lounge.
Come see me.
Or if you're in Jersey, just get a Uber across the bridge.
And ask for any male working at the shop, and then say, "Hey, I was just curious, is Ashley here?" Because I would love that.
Oh yeah, they'll point you in my direction.
Yeah, so thank you very much, and also to Altadis USA for the Upman, and also BS Cigar Company. If you guys are on Patreon.com/BourbonBS Podcast, check us out there, and also on Venmo, we had a donation for a bottle tonight. Venmo at Bourbon and BS. And if you like what Nate's wearing, it's a handsome red shirt. Pour one more, lay up another. We'll figure this out together.
Currently available in 4 colors.
4 colors. Absolutely.
Nice.
Soon to be another charity shirt.
Another charity shirt. So thank you very much. Ashley, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This has been amazing.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Happy Whiskey Wednesday.
Forgot my drink in the bathtub.
We're clear somewhere around there. This is when I cut it off,
Well,
sorry.
you need to end this that way it does cut off.
Well, I will. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll end this there.
Because technically we're still live right now.
We just are.
Yeah. Well,
The
yeah.
end.